At work, what's a red flag that only the people who are lowest on the totem pole are likely to notice? Missing payday. If you get paid on Wednesday and Friday comes without pay, don't bother coming in on Monday. Friday payday, no pay come end of day on Monday. Walk out. No other reason you're there. You work for pay. Whenever we got a cheap gift or some new perk from corporate congratulating us on increased profits for the year, it was pretty much a guarantee that a month later we'd be told that there would be no bonus. Thanks. I can't wait to pay rent with this coffee mug full of pre-dried out ballpoint pens. Was once told by the cleaner, this place is fricked. I used to change the toilet rolls and the bogs twice a day. Now it's barely twice a week. They're either crapping less, or we're getting less clients through the door. She was absolutely correct. Place got extremely downsized within 6 months of that. This applies more to the tech industry, but when the CEO calls a meeting out of the blue and says they have plenty of funding, start interviewing. Should have done this at my last insurance gig. They suddenly brought us all in and told us we were all secure in our jobs despite a recent turnaround in the market. One guy in my department started looking immediately. He left shortly thereafter. 2 weeks after he left, they told everybody we were getting canned in 4 months. Late pay. I've heard a few stories from people who have been paid late and stayed instead of looking for a new job, then later being made redundant. If the cash flow is so bad payroll is coming late, it's time to get out of there. Requests for personal time off are ignored or denied. Likewise, requests for specific vacation days go unaddressed or become postponed. I'm leaving my current job in big part because of this exact thing. Once I got married, requested some time off for it, and was told to come in. Yeah, right. Efficiency experts are brought in to sit with employees and observe their daily tasks. Never a good sign. A drastic cut in your hours for those who work hourly service jobs. If you go from 5 shifts to 3, then down to 1 or 2, you're going to be let go. They are either waiting for you to get fed up with the hours and quit, or you're about to be fired. Cleaning workers are usually bottom rung, but they'll notice failing health standards before anyone else. And paid bills. As bottom of the totem in a financial department for a small non-profit, I was the one putting bills into the system and then would print checks and mail them out when the higher-ups said to. When I first started, almost every bill was behind. They covered it up by claiming the person I was replacing hadn't been able to keep up with the workload and that was why everything was late. I spent over half my time on the phones talking companies into not shutting down our utilities. Maybe the last person was that slow, but it was not that much. Full-time work, yes, but too much? Dog trash. Fortunately, the right man had come in as CEO just before me, and he literally saved the company from collapse. I just happened to see what should have been the end of the company. He was smart though. No bills were paid until employees had been paid, and no bills but critical ones were paid at all. Then he paid massive portions of debts off quickly to put us back in acceptable standing as we worked out payment plans. That man saved a small company with $1 million sign deficit in under a year. I work in a different department now, but its annual profit now is around $2 million. Every boss I've had from the military to retail sales, who says, "I'm not here to be liked," has been incompetent. It's true you are not there to be friends with everyone, but if you have no people skills, you can't manage people. There's a big difference between a boss who says they aren't there to be liked versus a boss who isn't there to be friends. It's tough to be someone's friend and boss. Equipment falling into disrepair, OSHA standards being ignored, workers being asked to lie about injuries. OSHA standards being ignored, workers being asked to lie about injuries. Can confirm. Got fired shortly after I got injured on the job and found out my employer didn't have workers' comp insurance. I've seen 2 companies go down the tubes. In both cases, the first sign was removing unnecessary telephones. Where workers shared an office, the private lines were replaced by a shared line. When things got worse yet, one shop removed the doors from bathroom stalls to discourage lingering. This may only apply to retail and food service, but price hikes. If prices are increasing abnormally and quality is stagnant, then either 1, the company is losing money, or 2, the company is getting greedy and starting to bite off more than they can chew. Upper management can increase a product's cost by $2 or $3 and not bat an eye. All they see is profit margins. However, the lower down, hourly wage employees have to deal with angry customers and pressure from corporate if sales begin to drop. Look for any changes in benefits or amenities, like if all of a sudden they cancel the coffee service, or if they normally have free meals or something they stop providing them. If you ever get asked to list what you do on a daily basis or to document difficult tasks that only you perform, beware. We need a summary of everything you do to be written in a procedural manual, equals you're about to be replaced by some college intern. The top guy's seeing everyone else as the help. I work for a company where the corporate office is probably like 25 people. On my first day I was in the break room by myself, and then the guy that hired me and the owner walk in and the owner goes to the coffee pot. The guy that hired me said, "Hey Jim, this is VTL89, the newest member of our team." Owner doesn't even turn and look at me, just goes "Oh," and puts a lid on his coffee and walks out without even looking my way. I lost a ton of respect for him and the company that day, especially after my interview 2 days prior. They were talking up how much they care about their employees. Bosses who take responsibility for nothing. I had a boss regularly tell me how to do something incorrectly. Her boss would correct her, then she would punish me for doing it wrong. For doing exactly what she told me to do. She'd do things like spill a coffee all over a co-worker's super important documents, then not apologize or admit it was her fault, or even an accident she was responsible for. No, she blamed a step stool that was on the floor next to her that wasn't even in the way of her sitting down, or the counter. Co-worker was crying while I was trying to rescue the papers, and boss spent the whole time being a bee about the step stool because she was too embarrassed and immature and disrespectful to own up to it. The indifference of people in top positions. They're the ones who make workplaces turn crummy. IT admin. Shutting off access accounts when layoffs are happening. When our CIO got laid off, I heard the admin who got the orders had his finger tighten and triple checked the order. Likely he knew before any of the CIO's direct reports in the vast majority of the company. As someone who used to be busy most of the time, the fact that I found myself stretching 30 hours of work into 40 all of a sudden was the first sign of bad times soon. Shortly after that started, our boss announced that there was a cash flow problem due to a combination of factors: less work, clients not paying, projects not progressing, thus not being able to bill hours etc. I started looking for work immediately. Have had some interest but nothing concrete yet. The first person got let go last week, a recent hire. I doubt I'm next, but you never know. When you all get the speech that you need to give 110% to the job and be a team player willing to take on more roles. On the surface this does not seem bad, but what my experience taught me it translates out to is, we've let people go, we are not rehiring, we expect all of you to take on those other jobs too with no additional pay, and if they start playing funny games with breaks, lunch hours and overtime or demanding work after you've clocked out, it is time to GTFO. At my husband's large Fortune 50 company, they were laying off several dozen people each quarter starting in 2009. Your department would get an email to meet at an off-site conference facility Friday morning. From there, those being let go would be handed a box with your personal stuff, a brown bagged lunch, a packet with your severance info in exchange for signing a corporate waiver and handing in your badge. You didn't get to clean out your office, say goodbye, finish your work. You were just gone. This went on for nearly 3 years. Terrible way to live. He managed to make it to retirement, but to this day he can't look at a brown bag lunch. That's cold AF. When paychecks bounce. The amazing thing about that job was the checks cleared. When passing down the hall. People who ignore your good morning unless they need something from you or your higher up. This is a major red flag, and to anyone lowest on the hierarchy it's crystal clear. Worsening conditions in the back room. The more stuff that gets backstocked, the more full the back room gets, which makes it harder to keep it organized, which makes it harder to find what you need to send to the sales floor, which means less product on the sales floor, which means fewer sales. Fewer sales leads to less profits, leads to fewer hours for the low-level employees, leads to the backroom getting worse. Retail logistics is a vicious cycle if you let it be. The way the bosses or owners treat their staff is very indicative of the work environment. Lowest man on the totem pole will often catch the most crap. How the bosses deliver that crap says a lot. Cleaners see everything. Late bill payments on desks, employees cheating on their spouse, empty liquor bottles placed in envelopes in the trash. I've been a cleaner for 15 years and I've seen literally everything. Also, cleaners tend to be really chill, so people tell them things. Find out the employee turnover rate, especially if it's a small company. I worked at a place that started out great, seemed to have great pay and benefits, but had more and more problems with management. Then I started finding out that our 5-person office had 11 people quit or been fired over the past year. A major red flag. I stayed and put up with their crap much longer than I should have. A hiring freeze and mandatory overtime raises a few eyebrows. The second a job tells me I have mandatory overtime, if I'm salaried, not hourly, is the second I quit without notice. I'm a tech writer, which means I sometimes get to be effectively the first user of a new application. As I'm writing the manual for it, you can always tell where the company has saved cash, usually on UI UX design and UI copy. I'm fairly technical, a bit of front-end coding skill, basic familiarity with a range of tech, jack of all trades. So if I am struggling to work out how to do stuff in your UI, I kinda assume customers will. I came into the shop I worked in one day and all the sales assistants were taping the ratty old carpet down. Weird, I thought. Then the fire escape door didn't close, so we started locking it with 2 bike locks. Odd, I think. Then I got told not to order in some of our more expensive stock during a very busy time of year. One night as I was closing up, I saw my boss leaving in a much nicer car than he used to have. Frick, we're closing down. And I was right. Mice. Workers will notice mice before management even knows or really cares. Unless your bosses are cats. This is a really insightful question. In restaurants, as a server, if the kitchen is in a bad mood, you know you are fricked for the shift. Usually it means the manager is on a rampage. Bad management and poor leadership at the top, because you have to do the work on the ground to implement their vision. Crap flows to the bottom. When you are discreetly contacted by law enforcement agencies asking questions about your employer and place of work. Water damage and termites will start affecting the lowest part of a totem pole first. Wood sculptures should installed into higher ground so water flows away from the base during rain. Also, totems don't usually feature flags, so a red flag is a red flag. Story 1. My daughter's first job out of college last year was working for a small internet marketing company. Her entire department was given an unexpected furlough during the last 2 weeks of December and I told her to start looking. She got a layoff notice after Christmas via the instant messaging platform they used. Classy. She now works for a much better company. Story 2. One of our favorite restaurants, locally owned, stopped taking credit and debit cards. Their machine was broken. This was before the rise in popularity of services like Venmo and Apple Pay. They would occasionally have their phone disconnected. They have been out of business for a few years now. If your company gives you a phone, get ready to be harassed constantly. That phone is code for "we expect you to be available 24/7" so your direct supervisor doesn't have to be until you need them. Then it becomes voicemail leaving device. My dad worked 45 years for Sears Canada. We saw the flags a mile away when they start selling assets and giving big bonuses. I realize this doesn't count, but civilians may find this interesting. In the Navy, United States, it's a well-known and, at least it was in my ship, oftentimes true fact that if out of nowhere the ship's galley, kitchen, serves steak and lobster, there is bad news coming from the captain. Usually in the form of you're going on an unexpected deployment, your deployment being extended, or something along those lines. It happened to us multiple times as to where we hated seeing that on the menu, and after dinner like clockwork the captain hit us with the bad news. At work, what's a red flag that only the people who are lowest on the totem pole are likely to notice? Was once told by the cleaner, "This place is fricked. I used to change the toilet rolls and the bogs twice a day. Now it's barely twice a week. They're either crapping less, or we're getting less clients through the door." She was absolutely correct. Place got extremely downsized within 6 months of that. This applies more to the tech industry, but when the CEO calls a meeting out of the blue and says they have plenty of funding, start interviewing. Should have done this at my last insurance gig. They suddenly brought us all in and told us we were all secure in our jobs despite a recent turnaround in the market. One guy in my department started looking immediately. He left shortly thereafter. 2 weeks after he left, they told everybody we were getting canned in 4 months. Late pay. I've heard a few stories from people who have been paid late and stayed instead of looking for a new job, then later being made redundant. If the cash flow is so bad payroll is coming late, it's time to get out of there. Requests for personal time off are ignored or denied. Likewise, requests for specific vacation days go unaddressed or become postponed. I'm leaving my current job in big part because of this exact thing. Once I got married, requested some time off for it, and was told to come in. Yeah, right. A drastic cut in your hours for those who work hourly service jobs. If you go from 5 shifts to 3, then down to 1 or 2, you're going to be let go. They're either waiting for you to get fed up with the hours and quit, or you're about to be fired. And paid bills. As bottom of the totem in a financial department for a small non-profit, I was the one putting bills into the system and then would print checks and mail them out when the higher-ups said to. When I first started, almost every bill was behind. They covered it up by claiming the person I was replacing hadn't been able to keep up with the workload and that was why everything was late. I spent over half my time on the phones talking companies into not shutting down our utilities. Maybe the last person was that slow, but it was not that much. Full-time work, yes, but too much? Horseshit. Fortunately the right man had come in as CEO just before me, and he literally saved the company from collapse. I just happened to see what should have been the end of the company. He was smart though. No bills were paid until employees had been paid, and no bills but critical ones were paid at all. Then he paid massive portions of debts off quickly to put us back in acceptable standing as we worked out payment plans. That man saved a small company with $1 million sign deficit in under a year. I work in a different department now, but its annual profit now is around $2 million. Every boss I've had from the military to retail sales, who says, "I'm not here to be liked," has been incompetent. It's true you are not there to be friends with everyone, but if you have no people skills, you can't manage people. There's a big difference between a boss who says they aren't there to be liked versus a boss who isn't there to be friends. It's tough to be someone's friend and boss. I've seen 2 companies go down the tubes. In both cases, the first sign was removing unnecessary telephones. Where workers shared an office, the private lines were replaced by a shared line. When things got worse yet, one shop removed the doors from bathroom stalls to discourage lingering. The second to bathroom stall doors are removed, I'm gone. I'm not about to watch people walking past me as I'm taking a crap. This may only apply to retail and food service, but price hikes. If prices are increasing abnormally and quality is stagnant, then either 1, the company is losing money, or 2, the company is getting greedy and starting to bite off more than they can chew. Upper management can increase a product's cost by $2 or $3 and not bat an eye. All they see is profit margins. However, the lower down, hourly wage employees have to deal with angry customers and pressure from corporate if sales begin to drop. Look for any changes in benefits or amenities, like if all of a sudden they cancel the coffee service, or if they normally have free meals or something they stop providing them. If you ever get asked to list what you do on a daily basis or to document difficult tasks that only you perform, beware. We need a summary of everything you do to be written in a procedural manual, equals you're about to be replaced by some college intern. The top guy's seeing everyone else as the help. I work for a company where the corporate office is probably like 25 people. On my first day I was in the break room by myself, and then the guy that hired me and the owner walk in and the owner goes to the coffee pot. The guy that hired me said, "Hey Jim, this is VTL89, the newest member of our team." Owner doesn't even turn and look at me, just goes "Oh," and puts a lid on his coffee and walks out without even looking my way. I lost a ton of respect for him and the company that day, especially after my interview 2 days prior. They were talking up how much they care about their employees. Bosses who take responsibility for nothing. I had a boss regularly tell me how to do something incorrectly. Her boss would correct her, then she would punish me for doing it wrong. For doing exactly what she told me to do. She'd do things like spill a coffee all over a co-worker's super important documents, then not apologize or admit it was her fault, or even an accident she was responsible for. No, she blamed the step stool that was on the floor next to her that wasn't even in the way of her sitting down, or the counter. Co-worker was crying while I was trying to rescue the papers, and booze spent the whole time being a bee about the step stool because she was too embarrassed and immature and disrespectful to own up to it. IT admin. Shutting off access accounts when layoffs are happening. When our CIO got laid off, I heard the admin who got the orders had his finger tighten and double triple check the order. Likely he knew before any of the CIO's direct reports in the vast majority of the company. As someone who used to be busy most of the time, the fact that I found myself stretching 30 hours of work into 40 all of a sudden was the first sign of bad times soon. Shortly after that started, our boss announced that there was a cash flow problem due to a combination of factors. Less work, clients not paying, projects not progressing, thus not being able to bill hours etc. I started looking for work immediately. Have had some interest but nothing concrete yet. The first person got let go last week. A recent hire. I doubt I'm next, but you never know. Even if you're not next, the guy who is will probably get a slight stay of execution if you quit. When you all get the speech that you need to give 110% to the job and be a team player willing to take on more roles. On the surface this does not seem bad, but what my experience taught me it translates out to is, we've let people go, we are not rehiring, we expect all of you to take on those other jobs too with no additional pay, and if they start playing funny games with breaks, lunch hours and overtime or demanding work after you've clocked out, it is time to GTFO. So much this. Nothing good ever happens when this sort of nonsense starts getting thrown around. At my husband's large Fortune 50 company, they were laying off several dozen people each quarter starting in 2009. Your department would get an email to meet at an off-site conference facility Friday morning. From there those being let go would be handed a box with your personal stuff, a brown bagged lunch, a packet with your severance info in exchange for signing a corporate waiver and handing in your badge. You didn't get to clean out your office, say goodbye, finish your work, you were just gone. This went on for nearly 3 years. Terrible way to live. He managed to make it to retirement, but to this day he can't look at a brown bag lunch. That's cold AF. Whenever we got a cheap gift or some new perk from corporate congratulating us on increased profits for the year, it was pretty much a guarantee that a month later we'd be told that there would be no bonus. Thanks. I can't wait to pay rent with this coffee mug full of pre-dried out ballpoint pens. I hope my rent can be paid with water bottles and beanies. When passing down the hall, people who ignore your good morning unless they need something from you or you're higher up. This is a major red flag, and to anyone lowest on the hierarchy it's crystal clear. It's ridiculous honestly. There's a security desk at the front door of my workplace. I say good morning and have a good evening every single day when I come and go. The amount of people who just walk right by this guy without even a glance toward him is insane. It literally takes only an ounce of effort to mutter a greeting to someone. Worsening conditions in the back room. The more stuff that gets backstocked, the more full the back room gets, which makes it harder to keep it organized, which makes it harder to find what you need to send to the sales floor, which means less product on the sales floor, which means fewer sales. Fewer sales leads to less profits, leads to fewer hours for the low-level employees, leads to the backroom getting worse. Retail logistics is a vicious cycle if you let it be. Cleaners see everything. Late bill payments on desks, employees cheating on their spouse, empty liquor bottles placed in envelopes in the trash. I've been a cleaner for 15 years and I've seen literally everything. Also, cleaners tend to be really chill, so people tell them things. You guys gals also have some of the best stories. Find out the employee turnover rate, especially if it's a small company. I worked at a place that started out great, Seemed to have great pay and benefits but had more and more problems with management. Then I started finding out that our 5-person office had 11 people quit or been fired over the past year. Major red flag. I stayed and put up with their crap much longer than I should have. Yep. When I scroll the listings, if I see the same company continuing to post the same job more than 2 times in a year, I'm not even applying. I'm a tech writer, which means I sometimes get to be effectively the first user of a new application. As I'm writing the manual for it, you can always tell where the company has saved cash, usually on UI UX design and UI copy. I'm fairly technical, a bit of front-end coding skill, basic familiarity with a range of tech, jack of all trades. So if I am struggling to work out how to do stuff in your UI, I kinda assume customers will. I came into the shop I worked in one day and all the sales assistants were taping the ratty old carpet down. Weird, I thought. Then the fire escape door didn't close, so we started locking it with 2 bike locks. Odd, I think. Then I got told not to order in some of our more expensive stock during a very busy time of year. One night as I was closing up, I saw my boss leaving in a much nicer car than he used to have. Frick. We're closing down. And I was right. Story 1. My daughter's first job out of college last year was working for a small internet marketing company. Her entire department was given an unexpected furlough during the last 2 weeks of December and I told her to start looking. She got a layoff notice after Christmas via the instant messaging platform they used. Classy. She now works for a much better company. Story 2. One of our favorite restaurants, locally owned, stopped taking credit and debit cards. Their machine was broken. This was before the rise in popularity of services like Venmo and Apple Pay. They would occasionally have their phone disconnected. They have been out of business for a few years now. My dad worked 45 years for Sears Canada. We saw the flags a mile away when they start selling assets and giving big bonuses. Worked in receiving at Sears between 2001 and 2007 while in school. You could see the iceberg heading towards the Titanic even back then. I realize this doesn't count, but civilians may find this interesting. In the Navy, United States, it's a well-known and, at least it was in my ship, oftentimes true fact that if out of nowhere the ship's galley, kitchen, serves steak and lobster, there is bad news coming from the captain. Usually in the form of you're going on an unexpected deployment, your deployment's being extended, or something along those lines. It happened to us multiple times as to where we hated seeing that on the menu, and after dinner like clockwork the captain hit us with the bad news. Submarine service generally gets this menu every Friday, or at least it did when I was in. It should be a pretty immediate red flag when you're the low man in the totem pole after starting a job and realize that you're doing all the crap B work that no one else wants to do. It should be even more of a red flag when 3 years later you're still doing all of the crap B work no one else wants to do. Also, another major red flag are when managers or supervisors enforce rules by selectively picking who they want to get in trouble for, based on who they like the most least. For example, I work at a dealership as a mechanic and I don't know why, but I am the only freaking employee in the dealership who has to ask permission for using a work lift to work on my own vehicle or have the porters wash your car for free. I have even tried paying the porters out of pocket off the clock money to wash my car and it still gets shut down. I am at the point now where I think I am a victim of workplace bullying. I have documented times and dates for about a year now of every instance of selective enforcement of rules and am as close to filing a grievance with HR and threatening legal action because I'm just so sick of the bull's treatment I receive over all the other mechanics. Source: low man on the totem pole. When your boss suddenly becomes way more careful about tracking who is going to make it to work and bitching about coverage if you request a day off, or any new hires are sent to work and trained. In my experience, this is always a sign that they received orders not to waste money on the hiring training process. Time to go. When the company you work for gets behind on their bills. I used to work for a residential construction company, and one day I went to pick up some lumber and nails. You know, the main things a building company needs. They told me the account was locked because the company hadn't paid their bills in 3 months. I started looking for another job that day. One day they can't pay their bills. The next day they can't pay you. Yes, Totally. Before they get to this stage there's a warning sign. Any short-sighted financial activity without a dang good reason. Companies are capable of outliving us. A healthy one should never be screwing itself in the future to get some cash today. Newbies and janitors in fast food restaurants are always the first one to notice the grossest atrocities. I worked in a McDonald's for almost a year, and into my first week I noticed that all of our vents were covered in a blanket of dust and grease. You could only see that it was the vents due to their location and the frames. Problem is though that we had really high ceilings, so you'd have to be on a ladder to clean it. There was never really a convenient time to set all that up and clean it, so it never got done. Also, our main manager just told us that if we had enough time to notice all that, we weren't working hard enough. So yeah, if you're wondering why it seems a little warm in your McDonald's, look at the vents. Cargo cult management. For people unfamiliar with the term, essentially those guys did this and it worked out amazing for them. We should do that too, even though our business model, clientele and product are totally freaking different from them. This happens in all sorts of businesses, but the worst offenders are retail. My old boss friend started my pay at $5 an hour, promising me that I would be paid minutes wage soon. That never happened. All I did was sell anime comic stuff for 7 hours and price MTG, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon cards all day. I stopped putting in my all because I knew it wouldn't change the fact that I was living paycheck to paycheck. I asked her why I hadn't been receiving minutes wage even though she promised it. She told me I didn't deserve to make minutes wage. I quit a week later. I had been super sick with bronchitis and a sinus infection, and she refused to let me take off to see the doctor. I was working 7 days a week. I got so sick I was coughing up blood. I worked there for almost 7 months. When your manager boss makes promises about money, don't believe it. Also, don't work for your friends, especially if they are your boss. It puts you in the most awkward situations ever. At my job, we have a monthly team building event. IDKY, it's called team building because we all have to pay for our own food and they pick expensive places. Anyway, they can hardly get people to show up, maybe 4 people out of our 20-person staff. That is because everyone is unhappy. They are so unhappy that they don't want to attend team building, but no one else notices. LOL. The company better be paying if I'm going to be making small talk with co-workers over a meal. I actually witnessed one of these with an ex-co-worker. I use Exco from here on out, and I work graveyards at a truck stop. One night, one of the shift leads pulls me into the office and tells me that our shift scores are trash whenever Exco works and they didn't know why. It was also brought up that if they didn't figure it out, we all were getting our butts handed to us. She didn't want me to find out because I would get in trouble majorly, but she wanted me to have a heads up so I knew what was coming because I was the only one who actually got crap done during the night. A month later, Exco and I were working. I'm sweeping the store, minding my own business, when I hear Exco say it to a customer. "This store sucks and you need to take your business elsewhere." Huge red flag. The next night, I told the same shift lead what I had heard come out of her mouth, and lo and behold, a customer came up and told her that he heard her say the exact same thing. In addition to surprise meetings where the CEO tells you everything is fine, someone takes a sudden interest in what your job involves and the steps you take to get it done. Also, that report you email out every Friday for the last 2 years, can you email that out on Tuesday? You're getting laid off Tuesday. From my experience, it's not the janitors. No matter what, a facility of any type needs to be maintained. It's the rank and file workers who actually do the job that brings income who will know first. Where I work, if people start being randomly pulled from the production floor, it means layoffs. Business is going south quickly. That being said, I do want to point out that the lowest man figure icon on a totem pole represents the most important one. Totem poles are red bottom to top, not top down. I knew my retail job store was going out of business apparently before everyone else. Management kept pushing sales, but there was literally nobody ever in the store to sell to. That's absolutely right. If you can work a 13-hour shift on single coverage and sometimes not have a single sale that day, that location is about to close, regardless of the pep talk your manager or district manager may be trying to give you. One of the biggest red flags was the day I started my new job. I was told 3 girls had quit prior to me starting and that there was another girl finishing off her last week on the same day. P.S. It's been exactly a month since I started and I've already handed in my resignation letter, lol. Recruitment freezes, overrunning pay negotiations, company car rules getting stricter, employee perks getting cut, pre-approval being needed for operationally critical overtime, not just office staff overtime. Managers telling you everything is fine are all surefire ways of telling something bad is coming. All of the above have precluded 2 restructures, read redundancies, that I've lived through. Other red flags for a business. Safety is our #1 priority. If they're having to tell you that, then chances are they've had a pretty poor safety record in the past, and the only thing they've done to fix it is behavioral stuff rather than addressing the root cause. Also, if it really was their top priority, they would stop doing whatever the dangerous thing was, but they don't because it makes them $$, and that's the real priority. Regular and paid overtime being the norm. Previously worked in a department where staff were regularly doing 2-3 hours a day extra, and paid, each. There was too much work for the number of people and the manager made everyone feel like it was their fault he was too tight to hire an extra person. Safety issues, especially as it relates to industry-specific equipment and practices. As a landscape, I've seen new people do or get talked into doing some very unsafe things. Most of the time they didn't know, until someone like me told them. I'm a foreman and pride myself on my safety record. Retail. If the employees and managers have to have a random meeting one day concerning metrics, someone is getting their lives fricked by management, and by someone I mean everyone that actually works and not the buttholes that do frick all. Start looking for a new job immediately because management is gonna make the few real workers do the work of 10 employees while getting the pay of 1. I worked as a contractor at marketing and software agencies for most of my career. The #1 sign that the agency was about to be doing poorly is that employees were leaving early every day. If everyone was staying until 8 or 9 each night, this was an excellent sign that the agency was signing a lot of new work. If people were leaving at 5 or God forbid 3 or 4, that meant the agency either needed to sign new clients immediately or there was going to be layoffs. It's especially bad if the design team is leaving early. They are the first phase of any new work. If designers were leaving early, a large QTY of people were going to be let go within a month. Hiring managers of Reddit. What red flag did you miss or ignored during an interview that ended up costing you later? I actually hired someone who was late for the interview. Her apology was totally reasonable and I looked past it because she seemed like a good fit. A few weeks into the job it came out that she didn't know what time zone we were in. That's not the reason she was late, but it did turn out that her understanding of time and clocks was insufficient for a job where scheduling things across time zone was a primary responsibility. Her understanding of time and clocks was insufficient. Oh man, that's gotta be one of the best phrases I've read in this thread. Without getting in specifics, other than 3 years litigation on sexual misconduct by the entire staff, we finally got the state government to allow us to put must be comfortable in a work environment that has open discussions of sex and drug use for a position in the HIV STD prevention. One applicant had this weird, sort of arrogant body language during the interview, but because they looked great on paper and otherwise interviewed okay, I wrote it off as anxiety or something. Joke's on me, because that person ended up being the whiniest, snottiest, bitchiest, most vile individual. Thank God they found another job before I had to let them go. This is going to be kind of a left turn, but the thread could use a bit of positivity. When I was working for my stepdad's trucking company, I did a little bit of every part of operations, dispatch, finding new accounts, hiring and firing. It was just a matter of who was available at the time to do the task. One day a guy comes in asking if we are hiring drivers. I inform him that we are and ask him to have a seat while I grab an application. He stops me and says, "Before you bother with that, I have to ask a question that could save us both some time. Do you hire felons?" To which I replied it would depend on the felony. Voluntary manslaughter. Oh crap. Come to find out the guy had done a 10-year stretch in the state pen. Some guys tried to rob him. He shot one in self-defense. There was some fuckery with witnesses. Dude couldn't afford an attorney. Public defender talked him into plea bargaining down to manslaughter so he wouldn't do life. He had his case file with him. I glanced through it while he filled out the application. Sent him for a P test same day. He was one of the best drivers we ever had. He was where he was supposed to be, when he was supposed to be there. Never bitched. Never caused any problems. Model employee. I'd hire 10 guys like that in a heartbeat. Literally the opposite of the question, but upvoted because the world needs more people like both of you. A couple of 17-year-old boys were dropped off by their father in a compact, red Porsche convertible, not that it's relevant, with frozen yogurt cups in their hands. The older one walked up to the desk and, with freaking froyo in his mouth, asked, "Can I get an application?" The brothers spent almost half an hour eating frozen yogurt, laughing and joking with each other, and filling out that application in our lobby. It was maybe a 5-minute application. When they handed their applications to me, I took them the applications, not the applicants. Back to our brand new HR lady and, laughing, told her about these kids who were obviously only looking for jobs because daddy made them do it. I pointed out a sticky thumbprint on one of the applications. It was funny to me and she laughed along with me. She hired both of them on the spot. Before that point, applicants were required to have a minimum of 3 years experience in whatever field they were applying for. Neither of these kids had ever had a job before. That place went downhill rapidly under that HR manager, because she would just hire anybody she liked, which meant she only hired attractive, highly extroverted teenagers. Those 2 boys and just about everyone else that woman hired were terrible. Old parking management company HR I worked for over a decade ago just flat out ignored the second page of applications, where criminal history declarations are. For 6 months, 8 people got hired to work in private condo skyrises, where the general building master keys were in the same cabinet as resident car keys, who had felony sex offender convictions. When the district manager found out, she fired every person involved in the hiring process and moved the 8 to a parking lot. I'm lost. How does sexual felonies and cars add up? Not a hiring manager, but every time someone brought up in an interview what's the fastest anyone's been promoted here, I want to break that record. They end up being duds. Go to get promoted so they can answer to a new boss before this one realized how big of an idiot they are. Hired a guy because he reminded me of my good friend who was addicted to OxyContin. Turned out the guy was addicted to OxyContin. Not a hiring manager, but I was a very precocious young engineer. When I was 27, I was hired as a junior engineer on a project. 3 months later, my boss, who was a great mentor, was transferred to another project overseas. For some reason his bosses decided I was ready for his job. They promoted me and my first task was to hire a replacement for my old job. HR sent over a pile of resumes that had already cleared their first hurdles. I interviewed several people and found the perfect person. He had experience in everything we wanted, and his experience in the field was with projects very close to ours. He was prompt, punctual and seemed very sharp and able to come up with workable solutions to problems very easily. Even though he was almost 50, he seemed to have no problem with a boss half his age, and in fact suggested I must be wicked smart to be so young and in charge of such a project as I was. I suggested him for our hire. My soon-to-be former boss talked to him and agreed. The head of the department agreed. HR said his credentials and everything panned out and they saw no red flags. He was hired. He signed all the papers and filled out the W-4 and we set up his desk and phone and let him know about the Friday afternoon contractor meeting and all that crap when he informed us he couldn't work Friday. We said no problem. We understand if he made plans for this Friday before he took the job. No big deal. There's next week. He said he couldn't work any Friday. He explained he was a Messianic Jew, a Jew for Jesus, and his religious views prohibited him working Friday through Sunday. This was the first I had heard about this. Nobody else saw it coming, either. We checked with HR who talked to the company lawyer. The lawyer advised that doing anything could open us up to a religious discrimination case. The lawyer said we should have asked in the interview. But isn't it illegal to ask about religion in the interview? To you ask? Yes. We should have said, we expect you to work Monday, Friday, 8 AM to 5 PM with an hour for lunch. Can you work those times? In the end, It wasn't a big deal. The guy worked longer shifts Monday, Thursday and basically did 5 days worth of work in 4 days. There were a few times we wished he were there on Friday so he could clarify something he had done for the meeting with the building contractor, but overall he worked out fine. For me though, it was a learning experience nevertheless. Sounds like it worked out. Not a hiring manager, but was evaluating applications for a position. One candidate gave some very thoughtful, insightful criticisms of his current workplace. We appreciated his candor, and the content of the critiques were perceptive. When we hired him, we realized that while he spoke well and appeared intelligent, all he could is criticize everything. Even when his criticisms made no sense, we started to see him complaining about the same things with us that he complained about in his letter, even things that were objectively false, like our vacation policy being use it or lose it, which it literally wasn't. Moral: a good candidate will find ways to frame criticisms in a positive, forward-looking way in a cover letter, not complain about their current employer. Sounds like a corporate version of the date that won't shut up about their ex. Company hired an arrogant individual who had issues everywhere he worked, both with co-workers, product and policies, supervisors, and customers. When I brought the issues up with him he seemed okay, and when I left he called upper management crying. He said I had offended him and was a racist. This was relayed to me and we had a meeting with upper management. I begged my manager to get HR involved and either look at me and see if I was racist or if he was full of it. They did not get HR involved and told me to try my best to train him up. I gave it a try and failed to get any buy-in or progress. I ended up leaving the company via headhunter for greener pastures, and after I left they transferred him to another location because they put a more inexperienced person than myself. He is now at another location doing the same thing. I have a friend with the old company and that dud of a worker has called 4 different people racist to have brought up his performance. I don't know how folks like that keep jobs. Disruptive and zero effort in any tasks. The hiring manager apologized to me when I was leaving. Candidate for supervisor position was asked about a time when they had trouble completing a task. I hate corporate interviews. Candidate mentioned something they struggled with, but the answer was that they found a way of completing the task that worked for them and did that going forward. So we kind of take that to be a big positive for thinking outside the box and being able to solve problems independently using the tools available to them. Now this was a preferred candidate, so we didn't do a lot of deep digging questions around the standard questions we were required to ask by corporate. Fast forward and candidate is now supervisor. We have a team of about 12. There is an opening checklist and a closing checklist. Supervisor struggles with learning tasks on checklist. No other team member has issue with tasks on checklist as it literally writes out what buttons you need to press. Supervisor concludes that checklist is poorly done since they cannot understand it. Proceeds to make changes to checklist master documents to the way they feel it should be done and chaos ensues. Now we have supervisor that understands checklist, about 3/4 that just press the buttons, and the rest of the team is now lost. On top of this, manager checklists have tasks that can only be done once staff has done their tasks. As a result of some of these tasks being removed from the checklist, manager tasks are no longer being done on time and everything is thrown off. When coached on this incident, supervisor did not ask trainer, teammate, or manager about how to understand the checklist and just made changes without communicating this to rest of the team. We did thank supervisor for being proactive, but then worked as a team to make any necessary changes but used the original as a template. But we also did some extra coaching on what they didn't understand. It took a few weeks to get everything back on track though, and our scores took a hit as a result. Supervisor was up for manager position at another location. Supervisor puts on their resume revamped morning evening checklists for improved team performance. Couldn't help but chuckle at that one. Oh man. Some people can tell themselves whatever they need to hear. I didn't miss it. My boss did. And it's something I pointed out multiple times during the process. This was maybe 5 years ago. So, for context, my boss was not a very good manager, and yet he was the director of our team. He had a good work ethic, a good head on his shoulders, and always got things done not only well but on time. He was rightfully rewarded for it all. That said, he possibly has the social EQ of a fish. In my industry, you need a thick skin and the ability to kind of bulldoze through crap. people, whatever. It's heavily rampant with scumbags, fraud, etc. And it's why we get paid well. We're capable of navigating through that crap and making our companies a lot of money in the process. This guy that we were interviewing just didn't feel like a personality fit during the phone screen. Immediately after the call, I tell my boss that I'm a no. The guy isn't just going to get run over by our industry, but our own freaking team. He sounds like a great guy, but just not a fit. I get told to give him a chance. Then comes the in-person interview. It's basically all confirmed. Super nice dude. I would love to manage him in any other scenario, but not here. He just doesn't have the personality traits to succeed in our environment, which was admittedly not a good one. Boss tells me don't worry, macabre, we can fix him. The frick? First of all, there's nothing to fix. His personality isn't crap. It's just not right for our job. 2. You're not the one managing him. I am. The dude ends up accepting our offer. Honestly, I love the guy. He's so friendly, earnest, and worked really hard because he saw the gaps in his skill sets from where he was and where he needed to be. But it took a giant toll on him, and eventually me. The guy ended up being diagnosed as clinically depressed. He hated the freaking job, and I was nowhere near experienced enough as a manager to handle something like that. When he was at his wit's end, I just told him to take a break. Start with a vacation so that he's paid, and then decide whether or not he wants to leave afterwards. Take care of himself, and to utilize me in any way he could for future prospects outside of our work. TLDR. My boss' inability to judge personalities literally sent someone over the edge into depression. I used to do hiring for a small store and the biggest red flags were too good to be true. Candidates who claimed they loved the public, never had any problems with co-workers, and were never late or absent invariably caused the biggest problems because they were lying through their teeth. We hired a guy. A couple weeks in, he got comfortable enough around me to open up about a warrant out for his arrest for sexually assaulting an underage girl, and not going to court for it. He felt pride and sneaky when telling me this. I could just tell. Had a smile and everything. Not cool, especially since I have 3 underage daughters. Told my GM. Got my boss chewed out kinda. More like, learned a lesson did we. But more importantly, got his butt fired and arrested on the spot for his next shift. Felt good. Good for you. I saw a similar story here a few weeks back and the guy caught a lot of flack for turning in the co-worker. It was a maintenance type job which would have had the creep entering people's homes. You did the right thing. Oh boy, this one happened last week. Hired a guy to be a seller of cannabis products for a new dispensary I'm about to open. He was eccentric to say the least. He has tons of experience as a salesman and definitely knows his crap. In the interview he got a little bit douchy about his salary and health benefits. This is the second interview. Salary and benefits were to be discussed with the owners on the third interview. We told him this, whatever. We hired the guy, gave him his ideal salary plus commissions plus benefits. The whole package. First day he started giving me orders and asking where does he rank on the chain of command. I tell him I'm his boss and he doesn't like that so much. Whatever. Then he started giving out candy to all the females in the office and telling them I was thinking about you. Have some chocolate. I told him that wouldn't fly here and he should cool it. He told me he was a social butterfly and that I was uptight. This was all during his first week. Whatever. The very next Monday, his 6th day on the job, I get called into the owner's office with the head of human resources and they straight up asks me what I think of the guy. Turns out all of the females that got the candy from him felt heavily harassed. Dude barely lasted a week on an awesome job because he was a social butterfly. What a freaking moron. So about this job. Not so much any specific thing, or any specific person, but don't ever settle for the least worst applicant. When we have an opening, we usually have HR screen the applications for basic requirements, then I go through anywhere from a dozen to 40 applications resumes. I usually do a phone screen on half a dozen or so, then invite the best 3 or 4 in for face-to-face interviews with me and the team. Every single person we've hired based on They were the best least bad of the applicant pool. Let's go ahead and make them an offer versus. Wow, I really liked her. She's going to be awesome. I've always regretted hiring the least bad applicant. I've learned my lesson that hiring the least bad applicant instead of someone I'm really excited about never works out in the long run. It's much better to keep the position open a few months longer, or even close it, wait a few months, and then open it again, instead of feeling rushed to hire a warm body because they floated to the top of a mediocre applicant pool. Very true. It sucks in the short term, but it beats having to hire for that position again a few months later. I and one other of the hiring panel called it out, but our boss felt desperate for hires and pushed it through regardless. I worked in a massage clinic. This was for a therapist position. Let's discuss the red flags boss lady ignored. Applicant showed up in Daisy Dukes and rain boots and a stained hoodie. She had a long history of drug abuse. No judgments at just that. Who had gotten fired for shooting up on old work premises 6 weeks prior. She was a non-stop talker during the interview massage, working on me and others so we can see what clients would experience. She invited me to her wedding in 3 days and said that because we would be her new family we should all be there. She reeked of cigs, which is a big no-no in the industry. Confined close quarters means no sense, good, bad or otherwise. Her fingers were the worst offenders and my hair and face smelled like nicotine for the rest of the day, and every time my hair moved I got a new whiff. The biggest one was that she, completely on her own, admitted to having used doctor's notes in the past when she was on benders. I and other hiring girl, we had a panel of 5 including boss lady, which is way too freaking many, but alas, brought up our concerns. We were told she's sweet and needs a leg up, which I'm all for, but when there's red flags of fake doctor's notes and recently using on the job, it's a big issue. In our state we are on the fringe of the medical community, but we are still a part of it. So that's liability after liability right there. We had a therapist cause a seizure in a client by using essential oils not approved. We got sued up the mother effing yin yang. Using on the job and something happening to someone means the clinic closes. Big deals. Well, what happens? Luckily no lawsuits, but she started stealing and using again. She called out constantly but always had doctor's notes so she couldn't be fired. She even got a 3-month note written for a work injury. I saw it happen and literally nothing happened. But we didn't have cameras and my word wasn't as strong as a doctor. She got wind we were trying to fire her, so got a note to return to work on light duty for another 2 months. So she could basically work as much or as little as she liked and couldn't be fired. Every time she was done for the day we would have to cancel all her clients if we didn't have other therapists open. It took 11 freaking months. But then she was asked to take an extended leave so she could get better, which she did for 3 months. And then she tried to apply for unemployed benefits, which during her paperwork she fricked up and got caught trying to double dip on the company's dime, so she finally got tossed. She worked maybe 4 full weeks of work during those 11 months. Yep, we sure needed her. She really contributed. Boss lady deserves all the headaches over this hire, but the rest of us in middle management didn't deserve to deal with it. People who speak in superlatives rather than answering questions directly. Turns out the guy, while super excited to work for me, really didn't understand the role. I ended up firing him the last day of his 90-day probation period despite spending an enormous amount of time with him trying to get him right. Ran a grooming shop with my ex-wife. We hired this lady who seemed a little high-strung. Tweaky, actually, but we needed the help. Some customers swore that they recognized her from a while back at another shop, but she denied ever working there and seemed oddly defensive about it. One night, we found reviews on our Yelp page from one of her neighbors who she was fighting with. The neighbor specifically called her out in the reviews and spilled about how she was responsible for the death of a customer's dog. She walked away from the table for a break. The dog fell with the harness around its neck and hung. We fired her immediately for lying to us and bringing her drama to our business. Oh my god. I called the guy's previous job, who he had written down as a reference. His previous manager, female, explained to me how he was a great employee, but his girlfriend was freaking psycho and how she waited for her after work one night and jumped her, which is why he was fired. He explained how his manager actually had a crush on him, and when he quit she began making up lies. Not only did this not make sense, it was a red flag. On top of the red flag that he put her down as a reference at all. We were hurting for employees, so we hired him. His girlfriend was crazy, and I have many fun stories from the 5 months he worked with me. Do share. Hired a guy, said he knew electrical. We're a low budget Reno company specializing in flipping dumps. Seemed like a hump to me, but he started wiring the outlets fast. I watch him for a bit and tell him to watch for the traveler on this one switch. But it seems like it's all good, so I move on. Get back half a day later and he hasn't moved on from this switch. He'd wired the traveler wrong, and when he flipped it on, I guess it was live, the breaker blew. I set the breaker and it blows again. I ask about the traveler. Yeah, he did it right. We pull the switch apart. Nope. Right in the hot. And you know what crap happens. I'm a little mad it took 6 hours and me watching him that he started backtracking his work, but I figure everyone gets a first day pass. But then he starts to blame the other workers. They all tell him to frick off. And then, he starts to blame the evicted tenant. He must have snuck back in and switched it around. I told him to pack his crap and go and spent the rest of the evening doing it myself. Blame the evicted tenant. I too lose sleep over the thought that somebody might have properly rewired my old home. Not a hiring manager, but I recently worked under a supervisor who had been out of the industry for several years but was trying to make a move back in. During his interviews, he apparently directed his answers only to the men in the room, even if the question was asked by a woman. They hired him anyway, and once he started, he refused to work with the women on the team, even though they knew more of the industry, since it had changed quite a bit since this guy had left. Thankfully he was let go about a year after he was hired. Oh, I got one. We had 2 interviews. Our interviews on my workplace were weird. We would have 1 hiring manager, 1 guy from the floor, 1 supervisor, and then 1 female. I was the female. The first guy comes in and is very sloppy dressed. His outfit wasn't that impressive and he stuttered a lot. His looks weren't that attractive either. I wouldn't call him ugly and he was teeter-tottering on the line of unattractive. His resume though was holy crap. Impressive as frick work history. References from all his previous jobs. Mostly management. The skills we need and then some. This guy could code, animate, fix, design, and you name it he can do it. We do the interview and despite all awkwardness aside his resume was his one saving grace. Enter guy 2. This guy is a knockout. Dressed beautifully, wearing cologne, hair swept back, a smile on his face, and very sociable. Everyone was impressed by him. His resume, however, was not impressive. He was fresh out of college. Only work experience he had was at a Best Buy and a Costco. His references were all family members, which is fine but this is immediate family. His skills were lackluster at best. He only could code in JavaScript or something like that. Everyone else was impressed by him on looks like alone. We decide to give these 2 a final test. The first guy passes with amazing colors and we ask him if he would like to add anything to his resume for documentation, etc. He gave us a list of volunteer activities and a list of notable achievements. We looked it over and were impressed again, mostly because he did a lot of stuff raising money by playing video games. One boss was impressed. Second guy finished the test and just said he has a good feeling about it. Walked out without anything. I'm sure you know where this is going. We hired the second guy. I lost the vote 3-1, and the first guy was told he was put on file. 2 weeks later, things in the office go missing. People are more stressed as heck. And what's worse is that we all think it's this new guy. Yeah, it was. He was a womanizer and we all grew sick of his jokes and attempts to pass off his work onto us because he would say I'd owe you. By owing us he would take one of us on a date and desperately try to get into our pants. A sexual harassment suit later and he was canned. We tried calling the first guy, but he already found another job at a better company, a job I would later move to. That sucks for the first guy, but I'm glad he got a better job and you did too. What's the biggest red flag you've seen on a first date? Not mine, but I had to pick up my friend from the side of the road because her date picked her up, then pulled over on the side of the freeway to see what was in the forest. She got out of there and never heard from him again. This sounds terrifying. For me it was when she mentioned that she was not single but did, in fact, have a husband, but it is okay because he has been in jail for about 5 years and will not be released for at least 6 months. Oh no. We were playing mini golf and he was losing, so he screamed, all red faced, and hit the ground multiple times with his golf club. He asked me out a second time and I said no. He claims he didn't know what he did wrong. Shoulder told M wheel, I don't date bad putters. Oh lord. I went on a date with a guy who admitted he fell asleep on his baby while drinking and the baby was killed by accident, so he has manslaughter on his record. Like legit. This happened, and the date only got weirder when I went to nope out. He followed me to the bar where I was practicing with friends for a pool leg. He proceeded to get drunk, puff his chest up, and ask my guy friends why they were talking to his girl. I was mortified. A guy got mad that I walked on the other side of a tree from the side he walked on. Like we were walking down the sidewalk. A tree was in the way. He went to the left of it and I went to the right of it. He was mad I didn't go left with him. I asked why he didn't come to the right with me if it was so important that we be on the same side. He did not like that response and I ended the date briefly thereafter. He showed up to my house 3 hours later and stood outside my door for an hour and a half, trying to coerce my roommate to let him in, saying he had forgotten something inside. She didn't as I was asleep and she thought it was dodgy. I never told him where I lived. So scary. He took my phone off of me and when I wouldn't give him the passcode I had to physically wrestle it off of him. First date. I wish I was joking. I literally just commented this, but I will add it to yours as well. We went for a joyride and he took me somewhere I didn't know and started telling me how he could put me in a hole out there and no one would ever find me. He then took my phone and held it out of his car window while I tried to get it back. This guy kept pushing me to let him come to my place, to the point where every sentence was like, well, let me come over and where can I sleep tonight with you? Where do you live? Let's go to your place after this. I was like, guy, you're never coming to my house, and he kept pushing it and I started to feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I got out of there and drove around to make sure he wasn't following me before I went home. He messaged me after like, I just wanted to see if you'd cave and let me come over. I messaged back like, you're a creepy sucker, and blocked him. He kept trying to match with me again and even got my email before I finally got rid of him. Weirdo. You probably avoided a very terrible stalking experience by inches. At the risk of outing myself, I was the one who showed the red flag. Took a girl on a date and completely forgot her name to the point where I had to eventually ask her. We never spoke again after that. I went on a date with a young captain in the army. He invited me out to dinner, which actually was just wings at the bar with like 10 other army guys he knew. That's not necessarily bad, but struck me as strange because I was the only girl in the group. I'd normally have expected at least some of the other guys to bring their SOS, but no biggie. As the night went on, the table conversation went into lewd territory. Now, I can hold my own with rowdy dudes and I'm pretty easygoing, but it turned out he procured me for a gangbang. Specifically, he said they would make me famous in a porno. I was so freaking furious, I couldn't even speak. I just noped right out, and that's why I take my own car and don't drink on a first date. This is one of the worst things I have read in this thread. Frick. Already drunk when I got there. Had a bag of possessions with him because he had just been released from the hospital and had taken the bus there. Finished the last 2 inches of my beer. Wanted a ride to the place he was house sitting. The best part was saying he thought we really hit it off and could see us moving in together in a few months if everything went well. Bro was looking for a place to stay. I once went on a date with a man who told me that he had battered his previous girlfriend. He seemed to feel sort of bad about it, but also told me that she made him hit her, so it wasn't really all his fault. I didn't see him again. That's not a red flag, that's a stop sign. Not taking their eyes off their phone at the table. I mean, why even bother going on a date if you're going to spend the evening on social media? A girl asked if I'd be willing to get rid of my cat that I'd had for 8 years. She wasn't allergic. She said that she just didn't like cats. Insane level entitlement. I didn't know it was a date. I'd gone to happy hour with another department in the company and 2 weeks later one woman from there said they were doing another one and asked if I'd like to go. I showed up and it was just her. her roommate and her roommate's boyfriend, and they had a table for 4 in the restaurant area of the sports bar. She told me everyone else was running late, so they got a table to get a bit to eat first. I thought it was odd, but then the roommate mentioned something about it being their first double date. Nobody else from work showed up, lol. For me has to be the time that he got pee, that I walked up to the bar to get a drink and that I left him sitting alone for too long, and then he decided to yank me off the bar stool and broke my ankle. He then called me after asking to get together again. That's not just a red flag, that's freaking neon blinking. Went out with a guy I met on Match on a Saturday night. I knew he was a widower, and during the date I asked him when his wife had passed. He said Monday. Maybe he needed a date for her funeral. She had a litter box with a great pyramid of cat crap in it. The smell punched me in the face. I immediately turned around and got in my car. I have a cat too, but I take care of her. That's just nasty. Her poor cat. When his wife had some very ugly things to say right before our date, he told me they were separated and in the process of a divorce. They were very much still together. Partway through the date, I mentioned that I worked a job while going to college. We met in a shared class. She told me she couldn't respect me for working while going to school. It showed I was poor and implied I was beneath her. I feel like this is a new low. Never heard of a guy getting dumped because he had a job. What an entitled B. A guy refused to pass through a door because I was holding it for him and got mad because I was making him look bad in front of other people. A guy cringed at that. My first date in 6 years after getting out of a long-term relationship. Asked what she did for a living. She simply dismissed it and didn't tell me. I thought it was strange, but I didn't think much of it. I was not super confident, but I feel that the date was going great. Spent the night together, but she left before I woke up the next morning. She forgot her watch and asked me to stop by her work to return it. Turns out she was a co-worker to my ex-girlfriend and they hate each other. Well, I fricked your ex last night, you B. Went on a first date after hitting it off with her on a night out. Within the first hour she told me she was highly judgmental and high maintenance. Bonus points for honesty, but no thanks. Extra info: she was undoubtedly a very intelligent and attractive woman. However, the vibe was just a bit off for me. Oh, she also kept referring to herself as a shark in her professional life. Date 2 never happened because I just felt like it wasn't needed. Plus we are both adults, and I'm a strong believer in not wasting my time or that of others. That level of honesty is intriguing. I think I would have gone for date 2 just to see what's up. She saw her ex-boyfriend, went over to talk to him, eventually hung out with him and his friends and then left with him to another venue. She was polite enough to also invite me to the next venue with the ex-boyfriend and friends. That's just plain disrespectful. This was a second date, but whatever. Still the biggest red flag I've ever seen. She came over to hang. Had a hard time finding my place. Well, I live in an apartment complex that doesn't have handicapped parking. There's an old man in our building, Navy veteran, who has Parkinson's. He doesn't walk too well and we as a community have decided to leave the closest spot open for him. She had a hard time finding the place, so I walked out so I could wait her down. She sees me and starts to pull into my elderly Navy veteran who has Parkinson's neighbor's spot, and I tell her not park there and I explain the situation to her. Her response: I don't see how that's my problem. She did not get a third date. The restaurant had closed and it was clear the staff wanted to go home. I had been trying to leave since 10 minutes before they closed to be a courteous person, but he was not budging. It just gave me the ick. Never tolerate someone who is rude or acts superior to retail or service workers. It speaks to a lack of appreciation and empathy and an entitled mentality. Thankfully we hadn't gone out yet, but first phone convo with a guy yielded that he had 3 kids. The youngest was 3. One he didn't think was his and he wasn't allowed to see the other ones because his ex claimed he was abusive. He also wasn't paying his child support, so he had a bunch of debt from that. I made some dumb excuse about having to let the dog out and that was the last convo. He pulled up in a beat up old truck, which in itself is not a red flag, but he parked in a no parking zone, which is kinda weird. Then he proceeded to get out of the truck and stare into my soul. Didn't say hi, didn't smile, didn't do anything. As if that wasn't already uncomfortable enough, his younger brother then hops out of the passenger seat and does the same thing. I walk up to them and say hi and ask how they're doing, and they just kinda look me up and down and scoffed at me. Needless to say, I turned around and left. Not good enough to be their family's next brood mother. A guy told me he loved me and he wanted to pay off my college debt. Still wish I'd had said yes, but he creeped me out so bad I noped the frick out of there as soon as I felt able to. He was trying to hand feed me olives about 10 minutes into the date. I wanted to run away so bad. Olive you. I went on a first date with a seemingly normal and well-adjusted woman. During the first drink she told me that she wanted to have a baby with a redhead. I'm ginger, and she'd give me £5k to impregnate her and sign a contract stating I'd have no parental responsibilities. But didn't get a second drink. She didn't want a second date. Literally didn't even try to talk to me, just asked me out. Got Wendy's and then sat there in silence. I tried to make conversation but he just kept giving me one-word answers or just saying IDK. It was awful. He started proselytizing at me, saying that he found God and traded in his drug-addicted past to have a relationship with Christ. Honestly, that didn't weird me out too bad as I was raised Christian and that was pretty par for the course. But it was after that, he started talking about One Piece and comparing himself to Luffy. I don't know, never seen the show and never will, and basically said after converting to a God-honoring life that he gained Superman Luffy-esque superpowers for real, but that he would be willing to give them all up if I married him. After we got married, he said we would take a bunch of orphans on a trip to Disneyland to give them the best experience ever, but not adopt them. He also lectured to me about abortion despite having never brought it up. Actually, I didn't really talk much at all during this. He mainly talked at me. He didn't even bother to ask if I was religious before trying to convert me, and reminded me it was a sin to kill fetuses. This was all during a game of tennis, my first time ever playing, and we were just volleying back and forth and he kept ragging on me for my form and said I wasn't any good. After that he made me go to the deli with him, despite having told him I was a vegetarian, and made me sit down and listen to crappy EDM on his new, bulky but generic brand headphones he raved on and on about, and showed me the layout of his new online store he was about to launch that was going to be revolutionary. He sold stick-on LED lights and lava lamps. I ghosted him after that, but unfortunately, he knew where I worked. That's where he asked me out, and stalked me. One time I was smoking behind the grocery store next to my work, after I closed, with a platonic male friend. At this grocery store is where the guy worked. He found me out back and threatened to beat my friend with a baseball bat. I started screaming. He dropped the bat and ran away. There's honestly so much more to say here, but that should give a little taster. When I asked what she was looking for in a partner, she answered with codependency. I said I think that being in a relationship should be like a chocolate peanut butter cup, with both flavors. People being good by themselves, but amplified by being together. She said that didn't make sense. Probably texting her entire family with live updates in front of me and sending pictures to prove to them that I was real. We met on a dating app, then telling me that they were already inviting me to all of their upcoming vacations. Passing up a free vacation is a serious red flag. Went to the movies. After we sat down, she rather rudely said, "Well, are you going to go get us some popcorn and drinks?" I said, "Oh yeah, I can do that," then left. Chinese flag tattoo on the side of her neck pretty much told me we would not see eye to eye. I am a Taiwanese citizen. A little red flag. First thing the guy did, out by the valet station, was grab my hand, kiss the back of it, and lick it. Valet was as horrified as I was. After we were seated, he kept talking about his wife who died, kept saying that he was the daddy now, talked about how much he hated her dog and got rid of it as soon as she died. The same day, he said, he ordered ribs, ate them with his hands and kept smacking his lips and slurping his fingers. I lost my appetite completely. Then he looked at my plate and asked, "Are you going to eat that?" When it was finally over, we went out to the valet station and he tried to grab my hand again, but I managed to evade that. I had self-parked. He had parked valet. The valet found the guy's keys, looked directly at me and told the guy that his car wasn't back, that it might take him a couple of minutes. I nearly sprinted to my car and I was out of there so fast. I also turned away from the direction of home and took a long detour before actually heading home. Date itself went super well, so we went back to his place. We were gearing up to do the do. He took his shirt off, had I am and butthole tattooed across his chest. He literally spelled it out for me, but I like to learn the hard way and dated him for almost 2 years. The first thing he did after greeting me was calling his ex, asking if she was okay and telling her that I wasn't a creep. I'm so confused. She wanted drinks, but didn't want me to pay for them. She walked up to the bar and sat next to a guy sitting alone, talked to him for a while, basically flirting, and walked away with a drink he bought for her. These people saying it's okay when it's clear manipulation is the real red flag. He pulled up with a handle of Tito's and 16 ounces bottle of cranberry juice and some plastic cups. He had clearly dipped into it already. Talked about how much he wanted to eat my pee for 5 minutes. Stepped outside and peed all over the side of his truck. Continued talking. Refused my hand sanitizer. Was confused when I got out immediately and drove off. There were multiple within the hour or so. 1. Multiple mentions of ex-girlfriend. I knew her name and everything. 2. Ordered an appetizer I specifically said I didn't want. 3. Claimed he owned his own business and that was why he dropped out of college. It's his dad's business. I don't care if you drop out of college, but while I. 4. Ordered an ice cream dessert after mentioning during dinner I don't eat dairy. 5. The bill. Over the course of dinner I'd had 2 tacos and a beer. He'd had a bigger dinner and the other courses he ordered for himself. He suggested splitting the bill. I told him I didn't want to kiss him or go home with him. Thought that was enough of a message to exhibit I wasn't interested. Sent me a dong pic about a week later. I blocked him. 3 things. 1. She said she was pregnant. 2. She said the father wants nothing to do with her or the baby. 3. When I asked her if she was getting an abortion, she said she was keeping it to help preserve the white race. First of these I chuckled out loud at. I was at a restaurant and saw one of my guy friends. He was like a brother to me. He walked over and said hey. I introduced him to my date. After my friend left, he literally only stayed at our table for 1 minute. My date goes, I just want to be clear, but I don't approve of you having guy friends. We didn't speak again after that date. 1. Talked about his ex the entire date, making sure to tell me multiple times what a nice guy he was. 2. Checked in with his mom via cell every 1/2 hour or so. He was 27. She was not in the hospital. I asked. She did not live with him. I mean, my son and I are close, but FFS. He would never call me to let me know what he ordered at the restaurant he was at on a date. I went on a date once and we went to a local bar. Got drunk. Went back to his house with some mutual friends. He locked himself in his bathroom. Drunkenly, I somehow managed to barge in. I found him doing H, and long story short, 5ish years later now he's dead. Redditors, what red flags in your last relationship did you miss until it was too late? The first fight I got into with my last girlfriend, first thing she did was grab a bottle of Jack Daniels and start drinking out of it to enhance the fight. I should have seen that one coming. This. If a person's response to stress fighting in your relationship is to start guzzling alcohol and get more pee, you have someone with a serious drinking problem and or depression. Good luck. Her brother told me she was a psycho and there's no way it's going to work. She ended up being a psycho. It didn't work. We got into a fight over condoms. Apparently she liked the kinds with other dudes' dongs in them. If you just came up with that, you're a genius. I had a girlfriend for close to a year. We eventually stopped using protection, relying on the pull-out method and her being on the pill. I got suspicious when she continually asked me to come inside her, and then I found her pill sheet that was missing most of the days. Needless to say, I got the frick out of Dodge and broke up with her. She got pregnant 3 months later to her next boyfriend. What's crazy to me though is that every woman in her family has gotten pregnant at age 17, 18, almost as though it's tradition. Holy crap. Where do I start? 1. Not a single healthy relationship with a man in her family, and every other woman in her family had major issues. I later understood how men had pretty much been driven away. Sister was addict prostitute who let boyfriend take the fall when her baby was rushed to hospital with head injuries. Aunt was disgraced former attorney who embezzled and committed identity theft. Mother was just straight up nuts. 2. Always the victim. I later learned more about the nature of her multiple physical fights and even an assault on an officer charged during her DUI arrest. 3. Projection. Had serious trust issues. Insisted that I call her as soon as I got home from a night out when we lived apart and would lose her crap if I forgot. Also looked through my phone and email anytime she got the chance. I later found out that she was the one doing things behind my back. I could go on for days. But for too long, I believed that she was the victim, that she was different from everybody else in her family, and that her jealousy and distrust stemmed from how much she loved me and how afraid she was to lose what she had. After all, she was a victim as a child. I figured that all she needed was a little stability and distance from her family. Well, after getting engaged and moving across the country to where she had moved 2 years earlier, she confessed she was in love with someone else, put a co-worker in the hospital, sent nudes to another co-worker, and attacked me with a knife during an argument, leaving blood all over our apartment. I left and drove for 2 days to get to my hometown. In that time, she told her crazy mother and aunt that I abused her, which is why she cut me. Aunt then makes public posts on my mother's Facebook page about how I beat women, and there will be a warrant for my arrest. It took a lot of medicine and therapy to get through all of that, but I've moved on. I really just feel bad for her, but I still want nothing to do with her. I'm now with a wonderful person, so everything ended well. Complete unwillingness to communicate about serious issues. If something was bothering her, she'd brush it off, bottle it up and save up an arsenal. Then one day she'd explode and lay into me about things that happened months prior that she'd been carrying around ever since. I was in a 10-year relationship like that. Eventually every fight carried with it everything I had done wrong for 10 years. We have been separated for 13 months now, but she still brings up stuff from our first year of dating. When I first started dating my ex-boyfriend, we used to play game show video games against each other. Whenever I beat him at Family Feud or Wheel of Fortune, he would do at least one of the following: throw the remote at the TV, my TV, that I paid for, furiously punch the couch, furiously punch the wall, attempt to break the remote in half, scream at me and accuse me of hacking, write a long email, 2,000 plus words, to the game development company about how the game was defective and it was impossible for him to win. In retrospect, his actions spoke volumes. No one should take Family Feud that seriously. Survey says you should get a restraining order. None of my friends liked her or invited her anywhere. I always had to ask if I could bring her around. There is a reason you keep friends in your life, a big one being they know what is good bad for you. Choosing to spend her divorced mother of 2 kids, evenings either with me or in pubs with friends colleagues over going home to her 2 boys, 3 and 6 years. The boys were asleep before she reached home and got her only on the weekends. I freaking hate parents like that. Let's take a break. This usually means I don't want to completely cut ties with you. I want to start seeing other people, or at least flirt with the idea of seeing other people without feeling uncomfortably guilty about it. Really what this is a trial breakup, to see if I can find something better in the interim without completely letting go of you and thus being stranded without anybody. My interest is very weak in you right now, otherwise I wouldn't risk this trial breakup. If you start seeing someone else, well, then you're an butthole and you don't deserve me anyway. If I start seeing someone else, it's because I deserve better and you just didn't bring out the best in me. And when you come back to me trying to patch things up, I will know subconsciously somehow that your frame is forever lost and I can toy with you until you act so desperately I never want to see you again, or until I find someone else. Whichever comes first. I'll preface this by saying most of this is my fault. I didn't notice how much it was changing me. I played less guitar, and did other things I liked less, enjoyed life less and would only look forward to seeing her. My life goals were becoming less important in the scheme of things and I was stagnating. I would constantly be swinging from elated being with her and then not trusting her. Deep inside, I didn't upset her with this. I tried to be the best boyfriend and look after her, without being in a good headspace myself and making sure I was okay, and not just putting on a brave face to cover my anxiety and depression. It was mild but definitely there. Eventually it was that we were just forcing the relationship on, but not right for each other. She was a lovely girl, but looking back we were only compatible to a limited degree. Now I'm single, I'm in a much better place in my head, meeting lots of new and interesting people, actively bettering myself and pursuing my dreams. Sometimes the red flags aren't with other person, but are with yourself. I was the red flag. I used manipulation and gaslighting to force a relationship I was super into. It went on for 2.5 years from when I was 16-19. I'm glad she finally let go of me, because even in the past year and a half since we've been apart I've grown so much and we were able to be good friends in the end, and she has a great new guy around. I only post this to tell people that sometimes people do it because they have the greatest of intentions but don't realize it is hurting you and the person you love. Anyone reading this and denying that they are the problem, step back and really think. You can change. Relationships are free flowing. Do not try to control a situation. What's meant to be will happen. I know exactly how that feels. Realizing that you're the poisonous element in a relationship is disquieting, but also the only way to stop being a crappy person. 1. Talking about getting married way too early. 2. Trying to tell me how to cut my hair, telling me to grow it out even though I felt I looked good the way I was. 3. Generally telling me I'm unattractive and that I shouldn't be photographed. 4. Being a selfish bee who only talked about herself. Tried to tell me I had to give up my dreams to follow hers with her. 5. Right when she started dating, she told me that she was selfish and heartless, but I should stay with her. I did, and it turned out that she was selfish and heartless. Somehow I didn't think any of these things, there were more, were a problem at the time. If a girl tells you she's heartless, she's not being pathetic, she's actually heartless. When someone tells you straight up they have big flaws like that, dangerous, selfish, heartless, whatever, believe them. Always tell me how she never wanted to get married. Literally later that night after she had some wine she cried about how she would be married to her ex if she hadn't fricked it up. Somehow I was the one who got dumped. She told me that I had an unhealthy relationship with my mom and didn't want me around her. I'm a dumb crap for staying around. It was extremely abusive and controlling. Now that I'm free I can see how much of an idiot I was. Oh well, live and learn I suppose. One thing that's important for me, I could never be with someone who disrespects my family. I don't need them to spend time with my family or anything they don't want. Just to not be in my way of doing it and to never say anything remotely rude about any of my family members, even if I do. Had a girl who loved C. I should have known. She was always so hyper and always wanted to do stuff and was always in a great mood. I thought she might be crazy, until one night she busted out her mirror and baggie, and then it all made sense. Relationship lasted 6 weeks. No hard feelings between us though, we both knew it wasn't gonna work. Easy now man, maybe she just liked the smell of it. He didn't have any close friends or family or hobbies. Inability to cope with stressful situations or adapt to new situations. He threatened suicide. Complete codependency. He helped himself to my pain medication post-surgery. Refused to go to the doctor for mental health and physical issues. He was mean to a pet. He'd get angry if I was sick or needed to use the bathroom in the car. I have about 1,000 more. All classic red flags, and I was young and didn't heed the warnings. He'd get angry if I was sick or needed to use the bathroom in the car. I think most people get at least peeved when someone shoots in their car. She always talked about her best friend, a girl, and I thought it was odd but never really thought about it. She would later dump me to go lesbian for her best friend. I have shared this one before, but my ex-fiancée, she eventually tried to kill me twice after saying that her dog was speaking to her. I should have noticed the telltale signs about her mental condition, but she was actually pretty good at hiding it. Some of the signs were her hurting herself purposefully, saying some oddball things, control issues, and lying about medical conditions. She told me she had cancer and only had 2 years to live. Caught her texting her ex I love you. Brushed it off. Caught her doing it again. Brushed it off. Noticed she wouldn't post anything related to me on any social network, which normally I wouldn't give a crap about, but she lived on Instagram and Twitter. Leaving me out was a sign something was wrong. Ignored it. Made 3-course meal for Valentine's Day. Candlelight and all that crap. Tried to put one picture up on Facebook and she immediately told me to take it down. That bothered me. Then, the last straw really, when we graduated high school. I just finished my first semester of college. She invited her freaking ex. Had him at the graduation ceremony and he stayed at a freaking condo with her and her mom. I couldn't believe when she tried to explain her way out of that one. So anyway, now we go to the same college and she wants me back. Frick that Lucy. Frick that. Sorry for the rant. Nothing to be sorry about. Frickin' Lucy. She memorized my class schedule and the time it took to walk to my dorm from each class so she would know exactly when to knock on my door every day. Sounds like project management material right there. The clinginess. Pretty much all he wanted to do, all the time, was cuddle, in bed, watching a TV show, etc. If I said I wanted a break just to chill out to surf the internet an hour, he got upset because he didn't know how I could just ignore someone who loved me and wanted to be with me like that. Which I found weird since per my definition chilling out and doing different things in the same room together implies in my mind you're together. Yeah, that one lasted a full 6 months until I called it quits because he wasn't growing out of it. Dude proceeded to send me crazy emails for longer than the actual dating lasted. When she told me she looked forward to being paid each month because it reset her bank balance back to roughly zero. Every month she would spend up until, and often over, her overdraft limit and made no attempt to actually dig herself out of perpetual debt. That was just one thing that comes to mind. She was going through a divorce. At 22, I figured everyone makes mistakes. No big deal. Nope. Despite being charming as all heck, she was freaking crazy. My dad went through 2 divorces with the same woman before the age of 25. Then he met my mom and they are still married 20 plus years later. I need someone to care about me right now. Right now. Not in a month when she goes back to her boyfriend across the country. I did care. Still do. Here's what I tell myself when I think about an ex. She's not thinking about you, so stop thinking about her. Women are a bunch of liars and cheaters who only like bad boys. Except for you, of course. I chalked it up to his past girlfriend who cheated on him and left him. Turns out he was the liar and cheater the whole time we were together. Only found this out after he dumped me. And the kicker? Decided I was a W for moving on with my life dating others over a year later, when he was the one who ended it between us in the first place. That's when it finally dawned on me. When a guy complains that nice guys finish last, run away. I had a boyfriend who cheated on me multiple times throughout our relationship in the past and always asked me and accused me of cheating on him. It's the ones that are doing it that'll yell at you even if you've done nothing wrong. I saw a video of her crying because she couldn't see me. I was at my best friend's house for his birthday. Just the growing distance. I kept telling myself that it would get better. I thought she was just up to her neck in college homework, which was pretty much true, but there was still distance that wouldn't have been there had she still had feelings for me. So when she got around to breaking up with me, it was about 90% a surprise to me. It was really a shame. We had lots in common. My last girlfriend and I were taking a trip to Woudencourt in France from England. I was driving and she kept trying to tell me something but we were almost there, so I asked her not to distract me as I was crazy tired. Anyway, she started to really freak out and then I realized the biggest red flag I've ever seen and it was all downhill from there. Switzerland. I'd only gone and missed my turn. Comma red flag. Comma downhill. This is so clever. I want to hate you but heck I might gold you later. Little comments about my looks or how I acted. I caught onto a lot of things, but I had no idea how far it went until I realized just how manipulative he was. On our first date, after ordering a hamburger, the waiter asks her how she would like it cooked. She replied, all of it, all of it, all of it, Jerry. Invited his ex-girlfriend over to his house to talk because he said she wouldn't leave him alone, which included wine and a sleepover. Now he asks me every day what time I get off work, even though I get off work every day at the same time. He's jobless. Frick. This is probably a red flag. Yes. Long distance relationship. Red flag mid-relationship. So I was wondering if I could get a fuck buddy. We were both really committed, so I said no. She said okay. Few months later she went to an orgy. Should have probably seen that one coming. Reading this made me feel nauseous. I wonder what it was like hearing that in person. Ugh. Wife was having problems eating. Every time she ate, food would get stuck in her throat and she would end up puking it up. Happened over and over for a few months, getting worse. We go on vacation for a week. It's bad on vacation. She has trouble swallowing more than a few mouthfuls of anything not liquid. When we get back she gets her throat scoped and we find out she has cancer. Stage 3C. She fought it for 2 years but died October 2012. If only we got her scoped right away, those few months could have made a huge difference. Major red flag missed. This went dark quick. Made me feel like my appetite for her was unnatural and that I was probably a freak. As a result, I began feeling I really was the odd one there, and even worse when she compared me to everyone else. Boy was I freaking wrong. Even though I easily managed to find someone like me immediately after that I'm still trying to fix what she kept bending and breaking all those 5 years we were together. Word of advice: procrastinate on whatever you want, but not this. You see a red flag, you freaking do something about it. Not long after we started dating she started to get upset about me spending time with other people. It turns out she was isolating me so I wouldn't have anyone to turn to when she started beating on me on a regular basis. I guess that it's a common thing that abusers do. One time she mad because I couldn't come over to hang out. I was still in high school and she lived about minutes worth of back roads away, and so she called me in the phone and told me how she was talking to this guy while at school and that he was coming over. She then went into detail about what all they were gonna do together. I don't really like thinking about it and have never told anyone since I wasn't there. After telling me all about how she was going to cheat on me, she hung up the phone and ignored me until the next day, talking about how big his dong was and how much better than me he was. It ended up all being a lie. So in my ignorance, this was my very first relationship and I was an innocent kid. She was also having a rough family life. I forgave her for it completely. This ended up transforming into other types of physical. One time she straight up kicked me in the stomach for no reason, and mental abuse. At the time I was basically the high school football star, so I just sort of thought I could take it and ignored it because I didn't really know how relationships worked and I thought I was in love. Because of this the relationship ended up going on for about a year until I just broke. And with that break, a different me emerged. The person that came out of that innocent shell was finally tired of her crap. I told her to frick off and that I hated everything about her and left her outside of my freshman dorm room building. I ended up graduating and going on to play football at an academically strong college and cut off all contact with her. I still cringe when I think about it, but things got 100 times better after that. My GF was a B to strangers. Never thought it was a terribly huge deal. It annoyed me, but she was sweet to me and I thought that's what mattered. Turns out if you're B to strangers, you're just a B. She told me her horses were more important to her than me. Red flag I missed. She was a crazy horse girl. Friend of mine asked out a girl. She replied with, "I couldn't date you. You would treat me too nice. I need a guy that will hurt me." Dude, run, do not walk away from that pile of crazy. It took a long time to admit and even realize it was happening, but the emotional abuse, picking fights constantly, always fabricating crap in his head that I had done said. When I tried to stand up for myself, I was told that I should be more respectful even if he was wrong. I'm constantly walking on eggshells. He's always playing games. I'm always feeling emotionally drained. He's slowly isolating me from all of my friends. He's controlling. Turns out he wanted what he thought he couldn't have. He was all about the chase. When I finally opened up to him, he didn't want it anymore. Freaking nightmare. My previous partner was emotionally abusive and I'm so afraid of him. Exactly a year later I had to dump $2.50 on a lawyer to clear my reputation after she slapped me with a protection order. Because suddenly and magically, I was the emotionally abusive person that she was afraid of. Needless to say, I came out squeaky clean. Always pay attention to how they treat their exes, because someday you'll be in their position. She painted her face for her college football game. She became a freaking crazy person each season. She lived for football. It didn't work but we stayed friends. I went to her wedding recently. Guess what the freaking theme was? Pirate. Dude was an introvert. I'm fine with that. Not the most social and didn't like partying. But when he wouldn't greet my friends and family I should have seen that as something more that weird. He eventually turned out to be a rude idiot that treated 95% of everyone he met like inferior. That included me after some time. Got fed up after 8 months of the BS. Not an introvert, just a regular butthole. When both of my parents said they didn't like her and they told me that the future was going to be bad for us too. Of course I didn't listen, but they were right. That B was crazy. I moved on. As much as it hurt, nothing is better than a healthy relationship like I have now. So much more happy and fun. She told me she had been depressed since her brother had passed 4 years earlier. Thought I could, help her through it or whatever. Turns out 17-year-old quiz was not mature enough or sensitive enough to provide proper support to somebody who was suffering some pretty bad depression. Ended up leaving her worse off than when I met her. The guilt of it all still keeps me awake sometimes, to be perfectly honest. What was that red flag that you should have paid attention to from your ex? When I met her family, her grandma said out loud at dinner, "Try not to ruin this one. I like him." Should have listened to grandma. Obvious solution. Date her grandma. She clearly wants you. He had cheated on his wife, the mother of his children. He was insistent on introducing me to his children within 24 hours of meeting him. I asked how their mother would feel about that. He said that he didn't care. He talked about his ex constantly. He tried to play her off as mentally ill and crazy. He showed me a picture of her and when I commented that she was pretty he shrugged and said I already had that. Dang, that's cold. He calmly told me, "Sometimes you make me so mad. I want to put your head through a wall." I never did anything to pee him off. Other people would pee him off and he would verbally take it out on me. Then one day, after an argument with his father, he slammed me into the counter and told me I deserved it. I broke up with him that night after I was a safe distance from him. But all the signs were there. Just dismiss them as him having a short temper. The difference between the men's answers and the women's in this thread are staggering. One of my exes would turn up with new expensive gifts from friends and relatives. He was a poor college student. His family didn't have much money, but he was given a couple of MacBooks, a nice Canon DSLR, a projector setup for his dorm room, and backpacking gear. A little fishy, but I didn't question it. First big red flag was when the university fired him from his stage management job because some laptops were stolen on his watch. The kid was a kleptomaniac. I didn't put everything together until he stole a $25,000 watch from a house I was house sitting. That was fun. She told me she was selfish. She said, "I don't know what it is. I have trouble understanding that other people have emotions that are different than mine." Now I'm pretty sure she was very high on the narcissism scale. At least she was aware of her problem. But I don't know enough about your situation to say anything more. I went out to a shooting range with a friend of mine one day. No cell reception for a few hours. When I got back into range my phone had at least 20 texts and 5 voicemails from a girl I had started dating a month before wanting to know why I wasn't responding to her. We dated another 10 months and I regret not taking this for a sign. Things only got worse. Alcoholism. Turns out I like to chill means I like to get sloppy drunk, stoned and verbally abuse you, throw things at you, and let the scumbag neighbor into my panties when you finally stand up for yourself. That was my boyfriend a few years ago. Lots of fights, yelling, and threats later and he stopped drinking more than 4 beers when he drinks. I should have broken up with him then, but I was too far from home and too broke to leave. But now he's the guy I thought he was in the beginning and it's all good. He put me down a lot, mainly about my intelligence. Got incredibly jealous. Hardly ever listens to me and is only interested in himself. I could go on, but this will turn into a massive rant. I'm not sure why I fell for him the first place, lol. She was rude to waiters. Oh, and she told me she wouldn't be with me if I didn't stop acting. So now I'm single anyway and training as an accountant. My fault though. Never let someone else dictate whether you pursue your dream. I'm of the belief that if you are rude to your waiter, waitress or server, you are just not a nice person. Obviously if the waiter is a dong, this is different. Otherwise just be nice. Servers not slaves and all that. When she lied to the police and got me arrested, I spent the entirety of Christmas that year in jail. On a brighter note, if you do ever end up in jail, make sure it's on a holiday. Best jail dinner ever. The fact that he told me I know how to manipulate people and get them to do my bidding, it's so easy. When he told me he thought he should be on the cover of GQ magazine. When he told me how much he loves complimenting other women and making them feel good while we were dating. The way he verbally abused the girl he was seeing before me, and I knew about it, but thought it would never happen to me. I could literally write a book about this guy. OP said flag, not flags. Come on now. A stranger once messaged me on Facebook saying that my then boyfriend added her and was messaging her as if he was single. Didn't think much of it at the time. In hindsight, what a creep. He pushed me for saying that I thought his dream of playing in the NFL was nice. He also got mad when guys wished me happy birthday on Facebook and wanted me to delete them, but he was allowed to have girls talk to him all the time. He made a Reddit account just to keep an eye on what I posted. Just a giant sack of controlling crap. Frick him. I recently got married to an amazing man. He shows me every day what a good relationship is supposed to be like. She was selfish. She told me, not too long in, that she only starting to talk to me regularly at work, we were co-workers, was because she wanted to order something from eBay and I had an established account. She had a bit of a pattern of using people. She was always looking for that next source of new and exciting. She would put down my hobbies and interests until I just stopped doing them around her. I saw all of this at the time but didn't take it serious enough. My mind told me that she's a bit of a mess, but she's my mess and I love her anyway, flaws and all. Then she got bored with me after my usefulness waned. She latched onto me because I gave her an escape from her crappy family life. I gave her love and they gave her grief. I moved her 4 hours away and gave her a calm life. Then she no longer needed me and started dating a guy who was a list of things that she said that she could never date. 10 years older, unemployed, no higher educations or job training, smoked heavily, and freaking married. They were doing their thing behind my and his wife's back. I was an idiot. 7 years of my life, ruined by the anger-tainted memories that she left me with in her wake. I gave her love, sincerity, and stability. She ended up giving me lies and cheating on me. We were the couple that her friends were jealous of, but looking back it was mostly because I was dang good to her and showed it in ways that her girlfriend's boyfriends didn't. And on the way out she had the audacity to ask if that whatever she headed toward didn't work out if she'd be able to come back to me. Number. Frick you. I'm glad you are free and you sound really nice. I hope you find someone that deserves you. Went camping the first month. Temperature dropped to near freezing after a cold front moved through in the middle of the night. I let her use my winter-rated sleeping bag. Woke up practically hypothermic and found her wrapped like a goddamned burrito, sleeping like a champ on top of her sleeping bag. Every spare blanket in the tent and still inside my sleeping bag. She wouldn't budge, not even to offer me a corner of a blanket. Got pissy because I woke her up. I finally had to get up and go sleep in the car with the engine running. She got furious when I opened the tent to leave. I should have driven the frick away and never looked back. You don't truly know someone until you have camped with them. That he loved tiny girls, small boobs, wasn't over his tiny ex. Loved preteen anime girls, wanted me to wear my hair in pigtails, and made jokes about fricking little girls. Yeah, being with him wasn't one of my proudest memories. Hey, this sounds like my first boyfriend. I was 15 and he got pissy when my already tiny T grew. I'm a really small girl. Now, he was also like 27, so things were already whack, but I was so attention starved I didn't see what was going on at the time. When I would ask him to not do something because it would upset me, he went out of his way to do it just to irritate me and wouldn't apologize afterward. Not in a joking matter either. X. This girl had a fairly fat butt. I agree. It was voluptuous and amazing. And he'd stare and look back at me and laugh. When I asked him to stop, he went up to her and talked to her. When I got upset, he ignored me and waited for me to apologize for being too sensitive. We're only human and we were made to procreate, so yes, we're going to look at other attractive people. Just don't make it obvious and purposely make me feel bad about myself for your own amusement because you get off on having power over me. When I got upset, he ignored me and waited for me to apologize for being too sensitive. Ugh, what an ass face. A few days after we got together, I caught her masturbating on webcam with a bunch of random dudes watching. I decided to let it go. My thoughts at the time were everyone needs a hobby and I do look at pee sometimes, so I figured it was just her thing. Plus she let me watch too and a few times I joined her on cam. So all's good, right? It was actually kind of fun. Turns out they weren't random dudes. She was meeting them once a week and fricking them in exchange for M. All the while, she told me she quit M and hadn't used since I asked her to stop. M. Frick that. I'm actually surprised I didn't pick up an illness from her. We fricked almost every day. Gross. When she told me that the reason she had originally started dating me was to get close to one of my friends while we were still dating. Oof. She had a bunch of communist flags. I mean, that had literally nothing to do with our breaking up, but they were pretty. I should have paid more attention. Wait, how are communist flags red flower? Oh wait, I see what you did there. When we were still flirting before we became official, she would text me constantly, literally all day every day. I'm the kind of person who always has my phone on me anyway, so I didn't mind or really think much about it. But then when we started dating, she ended up being the clingiest person ever and I really shouldn't have been surprised. I was once with a guy who during the flirting phase got obviously upset if I didn't text him back within 5 minutes. The fact that she was cheating on her boyfriend with me. She eventually broke up with him for me and then did the same thing to me with a new guy on the way out. And she was still married, 7 years separated, to her first husband through all of it, who happened to be a former member of a very major 90s band and was apparently an abusive psycho, but cannot prove for sure. He might be a good guy, who knows. I don't know if you'd call it suborns or selfishness, maybe a mix of the two. In short, the lack of wanting to do something for someone else just for the sole purpose of making them happy. For example, one time I really wanted to go to Stars on Ice. He absolutely refused. It wasn't just like no thanks, but why would I ever do that, and my answer was to make me happy. It'd go see insert fav team here with you on occasion to make you happy even though it's not my fav thing ever. He said, well, I don't do anything I don't want to do, but I mean, don't you ever do something because you want to make someone else happy? Nope. It seemed like such a small thing at the time, but that argument was very telling. This hits home. He told me he had an addictive personality. I wasn't allowed to act like I knew him if we were in public. If he didn't like how I did my hair outfit, he wouldn't hesitate to tell me. All the times he yelled at me or made me cry, especially in front of people, telling me to feel sorry for anything that didn't go his way. If he really cared, he wouldn't have cheated on me. Everybody turns into their parents. I saw all of these and thought they were solitary events. Eventually I got used to it, but I always thought, hey, something isn't right. And looking back, he was borderline emotionally abusive to me. But I never gave much thought as to what I could be because I didn't feel like I could do anything unless he approved of it first. I still don't think he's a terrible person, but I'm glad I got out of him when I did. I still don't think he's a terrible person. He's a terrible person. There's no excuse for yelling at you and making you cry in public. Stockpiling dirty dishes in the bedroom. He would eat pasta and cereal and whatever else all day and leave the bowls and plates on the carpet by his computer. Sometimes I'd go to use cutlery in the kitchen and he would have hoarded it all. It's just so lazy and inconsiderate. You're the first date I've been on since my divorce. Yup, ended up being her rebound guy instead of the serious relationship I was looking for. It's hard to narrow it down to one, to be honest. WoW player, never held a job or moved out of his house. had a mysterious condition that only sparked up when he didn't want to do something, and of course doctors never detected a thing, but they were stupid. Couldn't drive on the freeways when we lived in SoCal. Sockle, there's nothing but freeways. Got sulky jealous if I met up with my guy friends. I guess the biggest red flag, though, was that he had no problem with me making myself miserable at awful, dead-end jobs while he slept in and played WoW every day. All in all, I don't regret it. I was young and it taught me a lot of lessons about what to expect, demand in a relationship. Where to start? He told me he was organized but wasn't at all. He tried telling me how to dress. He tried telling me how to act. He blamed everything on everyone else. Nothing was ever his fault. Massive chip on his shoulder. He would get his phone out at dinner in a restaurant and go on Facebook. When she told me about this great little cafe she and my mom had lunch together at earlier that day. For your information, it was the first week of meeting each other and we had gone on one date. I don't even know how she got my mom's contact info. He was a liar. Lied about his age. When I met him, I was 24 and he said he was 29. After a year of dating, I accidentally saw his driver's license and saw that he was really 33. I was young and thought it was cute. He really liked me and wanted to be with me so much he fibbed about his age. Turns out he was a compulsive liar about tons of stupid things. A few years ago, I saw his profile on a dating site. It said that he was 35 years old and looking for a girl 21-35. That liar was not 35, but at the time he was 45. I get so mad thinking of all the time I wasted with that liar. I recently saw my ex's new bandmates wishing him a happy 25th birthday on FB. I almost died wheezing. She was in a cult. She would get angry at her mother for no reason, then not speak to her for a year. She was cold like a statue, never affectionate. I don't really get along well with girls that plan ahead for everything. I understand how some people might love that, but I'm kind of lazy and stuff. Anyways, my ex-girlfriend made lists. She made them for everything. Each day there would be a new list with dozens of items on it, including bathroom breaks during her day. Once one of the items on her list was make tomorrow's list. That's when I figured we weren't very compatible. Sounds super silly, but when my ex got back from a trip I went over to her house when she let me know she had landed, like we planned. Hour or so later she gets home and we're hanging out like usual. She goes to grab something and I go to check my phone. Both have 5S, same background, no password. Ended up being her phone. I open the phone and it's on the message app. There's 2 sent that day, one to her closest male friend and one to me. Except his was first. Super minor, I know, but for some reason I had a bad feeling about it. Fast forward 6 weeks. I leave for 2 months to travel. 1 week later her best friend texts me saying she caught her fricking him in the bathroom at a party. Just so everyone knows, being 19 in Europe on the rebound is fricking awesome. I would get the opportunity to go on trips with some of my friends on different weekends, and I would ask him if he was alright with me going or if he wanted us to spend the weekend together, since our schedules were so sporadic that we tried to get time together where we could. He'd always tell me to go, and then he would guilt trip me via text message the entire weekend. Also, one of his ex-girlfriends warned me at the very start of our relationship about how he handled breakups, but I thought she was being spiteful and trying to put a wedge between us. And then he followed the exact behavior pattern she had laid out. Also, he didn't maintain an active Facebook page at all, but a couple of months before we broke up he started being more active and posting a lot of pictures taken by his lesbian co-worker after he added her. I was the passenger in a car that flipped on its side. Boyfriend dropped me off at the curb and left because he was too tired to deal. We continued to date for another year, young and dumb. Everything everyone before me has written, but the first one, when he asked me out to dinner on a first date. He picked me up the next night and asked, "What do you want to do?" I said, "You asked me out to dinner." He said, "I already ate, but I guess I could eat dessert while you eat dinner." What the crap, bro? She had BPD and would have emotional outbursts over trivial bulls, and then threatened to cheat on me when I disagreed. 4 years of my life wasted. Also her refusing to delete her Cupid because she wanted friends. Also, her keeping white knights orbiting around her as friends. Word of advice guys, when a woman keeps a bunch of white knights around her and it's painfully obvious they are obsessed with her and she denies it, just walk away. She freaking knows she just wants the attention. Just stand directly in front of them. They can only move in an L shape. Bought into every single conspiracy theory, chemtrails, New World Order, Jews as rulers of the world, reptilian overlords running the world, not Jewish lizards though, microwaves causing cancer. I probably should have paid attention to the fact that she admitted to my face that she has a crush on someone else, later told me that she cheated on me for him, but at least she was nice enough to tell me, TL, DR, BTW, I'm cheating on you. His brother told me I was too good for him. I finally bailed when he told his 5-year-old son to shut the frick up when he was crying for his mother. Probably that he told me about his savior complex on the first date, moved things incredibly fast, and told me multiple stories of violence being inflicted on him or by him. People I barely knew telling me that she was freaking insane and would ruin my life. All of her exes were buttholes who treated her like crap and she didn't do anything to deserve it. She would often say the only thing that makes me happy is shopping or what I want I get. She had a really bad childhood and would constantly use that as an excuse for anything she did to make people feel sympathy for her. She got married when she was 21 and cheated on her husband after being married less than a year. She used to think every guy was checking her out if they were looking slightly in her direction and used to get really aggressive and want me to start a fight with them. He was cheap. Too cheap. As in, we couldn't go get Burger King because he didn't want to spend money on it, or drive down the street too far because it would waste gas. I am not into a man for money, but it was just outrageous how cheap this man was. When she told me I just don't bother responding to people when I lose interest as she told me about the communication with her ex-boyfriends, I laughed, but she ended up doing that to me too. His own sister told me that she loved him, but he was the most selfish person she knew and that I'd be better off without him. It could be one of a few things. One, that she always got on me about wearing my deceased dad's gold wedding ring on my silver necklace. I do it as a tribute and to her it was tacky. She once blew me in my living room while her toddler wandered my house unsupervised, which segues perfectly to the big one. She was cheating on her fiancé with me 3 different times. The last after they got married. No, I'm not claiming to be innocent, but just answering the question. What's the biggest red flag when meeting new people? One of my bosses once told me that whenever you start a new job position, that's usually the first person who tries really hard to be your friend is a problem child of the office. They'll usually start telling you of people to avoid as well. I've found this very useful. They don't listen to what you say and respond accordingly. They only wait for you to stop talking so they can talk about whatever they want to talk about. There's also the issue of people who won't stop talking in order for you to respond in any way. They have their own personal soliloquy. I've seen a lot of answers along the lines of when they say negative things about others, which I agree with BTW, but for me a huge red flag is when someone can't let someone else receive praise or be the center of attention. I've met people in the past who have shown small signs of jealousy when I've praised mutual friends, siblings, strangers, etc. And in each case it was indicative of bigger jealousy and self-esteem issues that led to some messed up stuff. Belittling their so in front of people but insisting it's a joke every time. Sadly in this situation I used to be the belittled so. I briefly had a friend like this. We all went out for drinks one night, and she relentlessly castrated her fiancé while he just sat there like a kicked dog. Meanwhile, she outed my gay buddy to people we didn't even know that well. She thought the whole scene was just hysterical. Toxic be right there. Subtle signs that they aren't remotely interested in you, and the only way you two are together is maybe because an obligation favor. People change their tune often when they have to conceal their feelings of disdain for someone. They don't really listen to you or pay attention to what you're talking about, but expect you to be totally engaged with whatever they say and act put out if you aren't. The distracting noise coming out of that other person's mouth stopped. Finally it's my chance to talk about me. Everyone here talking about slightly negative people, but OP asked for the biggest red flag, so I'm gonna go with having a swastika scar on their forehead. When they start talking about the tons of money I am going to be making with their new business venture and selling knives door to door. This knife will cut right through your shoes. Hi, my name is, and I'm an butthole. Literally how the shop manager introduced himself to everyone, like it's an excuse. When they monopolize a conversation, when they steer the conversation so that you end up being shown a phone full of photos, when they engage in a whole monologue about their health or relationship issues, when they brag a lot if not about themselves then their family members. People think I'm a bee, but I'm really just blunt and tell the truth. They can't handle that. Nah, chances are you're just a bee. Let's be honest, we often see these red flags but deliberately push on to form a relationship. If the relationship goes bust, we critique ourselves for not heeding the warning signs. This is an unjust self-criticism. I have only ever met 2 men that I'm aware of who lied to me about their ages when we met. Both of these men turned out to be extremely unpleasant and abusive people. I dated one of them and knew the GF of the other one. I think people who lie easily even over trivial things tend to have very complex psychological problems and are best steered clear of. How they treat waiters, waitress, cashiers, janitors, bus drivers and everyone in the service industry. A coworker friend of mine left a bunch of trash at the cinema after we finished watching a movie. I angrily pick up his trash, chased him and told him to throw it away at the bin 3 meters outside of the cinema. And he replied, "Dude, why are you so Japanese? I did graduated from Japan. I'm just letting the janitors doing their job." No dude, it's not being Japanese, it's being having manners. Couldn't look at him the same way again ever since. Reading through these comments made me realize I'm an butthole. First step in fixing a problem is acknowledging there is one. Being an butthole isn't permanent. Keep up the good work. Too much information too quickly. People who divulge too much about themselves from the offset generally have poor boundary issues. I speak from experience. I am a recovering poor boundary haver. When the first thing they tell you about themselves is all the hardship and unfairness in their lives. I was born with glass bones and paper skin. Every morning I break my legs, and every afternoon I break my arms. At night, I lie awake in agony until my heart attacks put me to sleep. People that are not considerate with your time. Being 5 minutes late every so often isn't a big deal. But when people are consistently 20 minutes late and make people wait, say for a dinner. If they nitpick your appearance or do a give and take. I just talked to a girl from a dating app who did that, and after I called her out for being very rude, she doubled down. It's a red flag for emotional abuse emo. You immediately start hearing from them about all the time other people have hurt them, betrayed them, or otherwise been buttholes to them. If everyone you encounter is an butthole, chances are, you're the butthole. All they talk about is themselves and don't ask a single thing about you. I get the feeling that they just want to only talk about themselves, don't care who it's to and don't really care about the person they are speaking to. If they are unaware of people around them in a social sense, like, they don't thank service staff or stand in the middle of crowded walkways and not move out of the way of others. Congratulations, you have made friends with a toddler. This is not the biggest of red flags, just ones that have recently peed me off. My ex was just like that. It was like she lived in her own little bubble. I really think it wasn't because she was a bad person per se. She just didn't seem to realize that the world didn't revolve around her. But it was really stressful going out with her because I'd always felt like I had to be twice as social polite aware to make up for her. When they have no problem dishing about others, especially friends, in a hateful way. Not only do I not want to hear what you have to say, but now I don't trust you. A few jobs ago, my supervisor constantly talked crap about the girl who was in my position previously. Then she wondered why I didn't feel comfortable coming to her with issues. Probably because you told me Christina was always bothering you and couldn't figure anything out on her own. When they bring up topics out of nowhere just so they can spout their opinions and not actually have a conversation, it's very telling about their personality. As someone who isn't much of a talker, I actually appreciate people that bring up new topics and talk more than I do. I have trouble getting acquainted with other quiet people as the conversation stalls a lot. If you have to invite them before they'll enter your house. If they avoid direct sunlight. And the biggest of all, no reflection in a mirror. They try to become close friends with you immediately when you've hardly known each other at all. They expect you to like them right away and don't seem to give you time to get to know them. Everyone has bad trays and good trays. Please nobody read this Reddit thread and start labeling your friends as buttholes. Cutting people out for having these trays. Get an ego boner for not doing some of these things. For every bad tray you see in a good friend you'll see like 10 good trays. For every good tray you see in a bad friend you'll see like 10 bad trays. And don't forget that you can have flaws as well. Sorry, I have no filter. Oh, so you're in butthole? No thanks. I've been on a few dates like this unfortunately. It's one thing to be honest and speak your mind of course, but if you lack any sort of tact it comes off as a very crude personality trait, which will only attract other crude and obnoxious people into your life. I have no filter definitely screams butthole. I usually test my friends to see if they're worthy of my friendship. Former friend. She told my GF she was testing her one day and now she's super confused as to why it didn't go over so well. People who gossip or complain about mutual friends or co-workers. You may feel special that they want to share this with you and curious about what they are talking about, but they're likely saying the same type of things about you to everyone else. It's a similar situation with people who complain about their exes to you when you're dating. You'll probably become another person they complain about to the next person they are dating. A few red flags for me are 1. They flake or cancel plans at the last minute constantly without reason. 2. They rant about their personal problems and don't talk to you at all about common interests. 3. They never have money on them but ask you to take them around to places. A people user. 4. They start drama such as fights with you or others. Toxic. 5. When emergency situations happen, they are nowhere to be found or heard from. When they constantly put down other people's opinions even and done in a nice way and only their way of thinking is right. They always go yeah but, or actually I think. Their word choice. People who refer to women as B, men as dongs, or anyone by a derogatory term pertaining to them. If we're already friends and they use it jokingly not meaningfully, that's different. But people complaining about my B of an ex are almost always people I don't want to hang out with. Immediately tells you the most intimate things about themselves and the people in their lives like a listing garbage barge emergency offloading cargo. When they have rules for their life that they expect others to abide to. If you can't handle me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best kinda crap. The first time I met one of my old roommates, she told me she had a 3-strike rule with people and then she was done with them forever. Everyone has general rules of thumb in life. Things they learn to be true, etc. But to take the time to essentially announce this to people you're meeting is more or less of a warning about you than others in your past present life. The totally shocking plot twist? She was a horrible person. Ironically, this did not apply to the guy she was constantly breaking up with throughout the year. The biggest red flag when meeting someone is when they say, "Hey, you're finally awake. You got caught crossing the border. Like me and that horse thief over there." It's even worse if you just woke in a horse-drawn carriage. If they keep talking rambling and don't let me get a word in, because conversations involve 2 or more people right, making me politely interject more than once. If they start a monologue, I'm no longer a participant in the conversation. I've become a hostage. They chew with their mouth open. And I hate that this is a deal breaker to me because I know not everyone was raised with table manners and it has nothing to do with character. Nasty eater equals I will avoid eating with you at the risk of starvation. People who led with their trauma. None of that makes that person unique nor will it excuse their bad behavior, which almost without fail will follow. ETA. I'm specifically referring to people that tell you about all of the ways they've been traumatized within an hour of meeting them. In no way do I think people should never talk about their traumas. Please go find a therapist or counselor. It's important. That said, it's a bit much and assumes a lot about the person you're trying to become acquainted with to think your trauma is unique when you're having an opening conversation. No one gets through life without trauma. We should go out and get pee tonight. Mate, we literally just met 2 minutes ago. I don't even know your freaking name. I am not going to make myself vulnerable through alcohol with you at night in a dodgy town I've never been to, just because we have the same phone. Sounds like you've been to the UK at some point. I don't even have to read the top comments. The best answer is when they only talk about themselves and their accomplishments. Even better, when you try to add to the conversation with relevant experiences, and they immediately respond with a story just like yours, but just a little bit better. People who proudly say I'm just brutally honest, I have no filter, are buttholes nonetheless. The disclaimer doesn't make you any less of an butthole. In fact, it just means you're crappy on purpose. Self-awareness equals self-management. If they tell that you're their best friends within the first week of meeting them, run. This is one of the first red flags to recognize an individual with narcissistic personality disorder. It's counterintuitive if you're not familiar with the disorder, but basically it's an indicator that the love bombing phase has begun. Run. Clinical narcissists are dangerous people. Making disparaging remarks about other people or treating service people like they are beneath contempt. Sometimes I will call them out. Like, why do you want to talk that way about him, or why would you treat a server like that? This can start a whole conversation about negative behavior. Sometimes they just get pee off and sometimes they make fun of me, but I like to hope that every once in a great while, someone gives it a second thought. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.